Hello and welcome back to my channel, Fanfic Fantasy. Today, we're kicking off the third part of our series, What If Issei Became the Strongest Knight of Underworld? The author of this story is YagamiNguyen from fanfiction.net.now. Let's dive into the fanfic. Chapter 13. 5. 2 days later. Raynare and Asia gasped in shock. So, like how I just explained, I, Rias Gremory, will also be living in this house. I might be inexperienced, but please take care of me, Atu-sama, Aka-sama. At that exact same moment, Issei walked into the living room and widened his eyes at what, or rather who he saw. There was a beautiful young woman with long crimson hair sitting in front of his parent, saying something to his parents with a smile on her face, and there was two other beauties, one with blonde hair sitting next to her with teary eyes and the other with black-haired, wearing unpleasant face, but both of them seemed to be in a very bad mood. He then remembered something Rias told him about when they were on the way back to the human world. Something about Rias said she would live with him from this point. She told him with mastery over sign language that I wanted to strengthen the relationship with her servant, after all. But he got the feeling that she forced herself to make that decision. Oh, what should I do? Asia-chan, Raynare-chan, and now Rias-san, so I will be having 3 daughters now. His mom, after living with Asia and Raynare for a few weeks, started to adore them like her own daughters, so she was more than okay with another girl coming in, especially when they were both friends of her son at school and very nice to him. His dad, on the other hand, was crying hard. Our son is so lucky. He said through tears, I'm so happy that our son has all these girls to care for him. I can finally rest in peace now. Issei crossed his arms in annoyance. After spending so much time with the magical earphones, he didn't like it at all when he didn't know what the others were talking, especially when they're talking right in front of him and about him. Hey, eyes, Rias noticed him and made a greeting gesture with her hands, smiling softly at her knight. Issei made a small smile and raised his hand to greet her, before asking her what she was doing there, at his home with luggage standing beside her like that. I'm coming to live with you, eyes. Rias told him, I have your parents' permission, so from now on I am a member of this family. Rias stood up and lowered her head at him. So please, take care of me from now on. Oh, all right. Issei could only nod his head while scratching the back of his head. Do you need me to move your luggage to your room, Buchu? Of course, if you don't mind, Rias smiled and let Issei walk into the room and picked up her luggage, carrying it to the only spare room left at his house. Eyes-san, I will help as well. Asia ran after him and poked him on his back to gain his attention while muttering. Oh, looks like there's only hope for polygamy. But it will be against the teachings of God. But at this rate, how? What's wrong, Asia? Issei asked, putting on his earphones after making sure that his parent was no longer in hearing range. It's nothing. When he asked her, she turned her head away in the other direction. Issei turned his head to look at Raynare, his best friend, who could only shrug and patted him on his shoulder. Rias soon appeared and followed closely behind them, holding a fancy-looking handbag in her hand. Eyes, I have altered your parents' memories. You can wear those headphones as much as you want in this house, she told him with a soft smile, causing Issei to widen his eyes in surprise. Seriously? Thank you, Buchu, he said gratefully, lowering his head. Anything from my knight? She smiled. However, in order to alter the entire town memories, I will need to. Don't worry, Buchu, you've already done enough, Issei told her, gesturing his hand to Raynare. Raynare-chan wanted to do it too, but I told her not to. I think it'll be better if I don't get too used to my sense of hearing. Well, if you say so, Rias nodded her head and opened the door of her new room for Issei and Asia. After they had finished arranging Ria's belongings into her room, Rias spoke up with a smile, clapping her hands together in front of her chest while looking at Issei. Eyes, I want to take a bath. Yeah, let's take a bath together. She stepped forward and wrapped herself around his arm, causing him to blush a little at the feeling of her breast on his arms. I will wash your back for you. Issei made a sound of both shock and surprise. Buchu, I don't think, a bath? With Rias, his master? The girl he had a crush on for so long was going to get naked and take a bath right next to him. He wanted to refuse, choosing to act like a proper and noble knight, but words caught in his throat. All right, let's go. She ignored it and dragged him out of the room. "Hold it!" Raynare appeared before them, stopping Rias from taking Issei anywhere. "If you two are having a bath together, then so will I. Kun and Butchu. Don't leave me out of this." "And me too. Please let me join as well," Asia said with teary eyes, standing next to Raynare. "Ara, I'm sorry, but this is how it is. Is it all right if this is a proclamation of war?" "Don't really care, because I'm the winner, right, Kun?" Raynare asked him, but didn't stop glaring at Rias. "Ooh, I don't want to lose, but it seems like I will lose." Asia looked troubled, but she didn't back off. Issei swore that he saw sparks between them, as Rias, Raynare and Asia glared into each other's eyes. "What are you guys talking about?" Issei asked in confusion, looking between them. It seemed like his everyday life was going to get even livelier from then on. Chapter 14 Inches. I can't believe it, Momo-san," Rias Gremory gasped in awe amazement as she looked at the red dragon-like gauntlet on Momo's right arm. "This sacred gear, it's listed as one of the 13 Longinus, boosted gear." Even Issei had to widen his eyes after hearing that name, while Momo just looked at him, totally confused. "You mean the one that has the spirit of the Welsh dragon, D-Drag?" "That's the one," Rias nodded. Truth to be told, Issei had absolutely no idea what boosted gear was, because he didn't have much knowledge about God's artifacts. One of the main reasons he couldn't find out what Momo's sacred gear was and decided to bring her to Rias, who had vast knowledge about them. The only reason he knew so much about boosted gear and the creator that was sealed inside, its power as well as its characteristics, was because of Raynare, who told him her mission a couple of days after she became a devil. Apparently, his best friend took order from the leaders of the fallen angels to watch over Matsuda because they believed he had the boosted gear, but turned out it was just a regular sacred gear called Twice Critical, which had the power to double the power of the user for a certain time, while boosted gear had the ability to double the user's physical and magical power every 10 seconds. It was listed as one of the 13 Longinus, sacred gears with enough power to kill God. Azazel told Raynare to watch over the boy, and yet she decided to kill him after discovering the true identity of his sacred gear. His best friend was a scary woman indeed, which reminded him to never piss her off, as she could be quite scary if she wanted to. "I don't know what is going on," Momo smiled as she raised the gauntlet up and looked at the green jewel, "but I take that this sacred gear is awesome." "It's beyond awesome, Momo-san," Rias corrected. "It has power beyond imagination, to the point it's enough to kill gods," she pointed out, making Momo widen her eyes in both shock and surprise. "So it's a very, very dangerous weapon, then?" The pink-haired girl chuckled nervously and decided to make it disappear. "I heard from Issei-kun that sacred gears could have a variety of effects, right? So what is my power?" "You can double your physical and magical abilities every 10 seconds. It was Issei who answered his regular client's question. "Double every 10 seconds?" Momo repeated, shocked. "Yeah, but you have to have the strength to handle that power. It's like carrying too much weight and you will reach your limit and get tired pretty quickly." Rias nodded her head. "You're a regular human, so I don't think you can boost yourself more than 3 times. Hey, don't underestimate me, I work out every morning, you know?" Momo pouted, crossing her arms on her chest. "Also, what about the voice in my head I used to hear 3 years ago? It must be the voice of the dragon whose spirit is being sealed inside of your sacred gear, Welsh dragon, one of the 2 heavenly dragons, D-Drag." Rias answered. In the past, D-Drag fought against his arch-rival, the other heavenly dragon, the vanishing dragon Albion, in a battle that was interrupted by the angels, devils and fallen angels, who were at war during the time. In anger, both dragons attacked the leaders of the 3 factions, which led to their bodies being destroyed and their souls being sealed into 2 separate sacred gears, with D-Drag moving into the boosted gear. Well, they must be pretty pissed off then. However, the problem is Albion, D-Drag's arch-rival. He was sealed inside a sacred gear called Divine Dividing, which has the ability to divide the power of its opponents by half after coming into physical contact with them every 10 seconds. Rias said, "Unfortunately, it's destined for these 2 heavenly dragons to battle each other forever. Throughout the history of mankind, there are records about battles between their users. Sooner or later, you'll meet the possessor of the Divine Dividing, and the 2 of you are going to fight. To the death, I suppose. To the death? Momo laughed nervously. You're kidding, right? Unfortunately, I don't think she's kidding, Momo-san. Issei shook his head, but put his hand on her shoulder. But don't worry, I will protect you. Momo's eyes immediately lifted up after that and cooed. Ah, you're such a knight in shining armor. If you pay Buchu in exchange for my protection, of course. The fuck? Since when did you become such an ass? The pink-haired young woman cursed in English and hit him hard on his chest before turning to Rias. Anyway, is there a way to help me, Rias-san? Like training or something like that? Can you teach me to fight? You seem to accept all that pretty quickly, aren't you? Rias asked, amused, and Momo could only shrug her shoulders. Momo was very optimistic about her life, so Issei wasn't surprised when he saw her like that, even though he could see some nervousness and fear in her eyes. Of course I will help, but I cannot guarantee that it's going to be easy. Before Momo could say anything, Rias added, but you can make it a little bit easier by becoming a devil. Even Issei had to widen his eyes in surprise as Rias' offer. But in the end, it was only logical for a high-class devil like Rias to want a powerful servant like Momo, who was the owner of a powerful weapon. You mean, like Issei-kun, become your servant and let you turn me into a devil? That's right. Well, how should I say this? Momo looked away, finding the floor of Issei's room a little bit more interesting than usual. It is a very tempting offer, Rias-san, but I think I will have to refuse. Momo said and turned her head back to look at Issei's master, using her finger to scratch lightly on her cheek. It's not like I am dead or anything, right? You don't have to be dead to be reincarnated into a devil, Momo-san. Oh well, what I mean is, how about I save it for later? You say I might have to fight Divine Dividing Possessor to death, right? Rias nodded her head. If I get killed by that person, or whoever they are going to be, you can still bring me back to life with those magic chess pieces of yours, right? Ah yes, I understand what you want to say now, Momo-san. Rias grinned. Momo Momonozo was smarter more than she gave her credit for. Well, I think it's like a video game. 2 lives is better than 1, right? Yes, but only when you know how to play it right. Of course. Momo nodded her head before taking a look at the clock. It's already 7:30. Ara, look at the time. I think it's time for me to leave. The pink-haired girl stood up and smiled as Rias and Issei. Thank you, Rias-san, Issei-kun, for being honest with me. At least I will have the time to set up my mind and prepare for my rival. It's all right, Momo-san. Rias shook her head with a smile. Your eyes' friend, so you're my friend too. It's the least I can do to help you. She said, I will send Eyes to tell you about your training later. For now, please be careful and call me immediately if anything happens. All right? Momo nodded. Come on, Momo-san, I will take you home. Issei spoke up and opened the door. Ria's magic circle could only teleport devil, so Issei had to carry her home, just like how he brought her to his place to meet Rias. Aw, he's such a knight, isn't he? Rias made a displeased face and crossed her arms together, but she didn't say anything. All right, take me home, Issei-kun. She then made a sound of surprise and wrapped her arms tightly around his neck when Issei suddenly picked her up bridal style and ran out of the house with knight speed, leaving a long trail of dust behind him before leaping into the air and ran on the rooftops of houses. In less than 2 minutes, Issei arrived at Momo's apartment, after running and leaping from building to building with such speed that everything became a blur to Momo, as her human eyes weren't capable of catching up to intense speed. Again, that was way too fast. Momo pouted as Issei put her down to the ground. Well, I thought you needed to go home as soon as possible, so, Issei said, scratching of the back of his head. Nah, it's fine, that was still one hell of a trip. The pink-haired young woman smiled. So, I take that the two of us are going to spend a lot of times with each other from now on, am I right? Yeah, probably, Issei said, before questioning his regular customer. Are you really okay, Momo-san? I mean, to know about all those things? To tell you the truth, I'm a bit nervous and afraid of what's coming. Momo nodded her head with a soft smile, looking away. Suddenly, I know that I'm the possessor of one of the most powerful weapons in the world, and I'm destined to fight the person who has the rival of the dragon that's sealed inside me then. Not to mention that I'm about to learn how to fight properly, like you, and have to do it in real life, too. Issei couldn't help but raise an eyebrow after hearing that, but decided to remain silent anyway. It's actually not that hard for me to accept, especially when I have already accepted that supernatural beings like angels and devils are living around me. I see, Issei smiled. I guess I will be in your care, Issei-kun. She then turned to him and bowed her head a little, with her hands put together in front of her lap. Please look after me from now on. Of course I will, Momo-san. Issei grinned. Anyway, see you tomorrow, Issei-kun. Momo pulled the key of her apartment from her skirt's pocket and opened the door. You should also return to your home soon, before Rias-san and the other girls think that I'm trying to take their beloved knight away. See you later, Momo-san. Issei nodded his head and left as soon as he heard the sound of the door being locked. It's almost time for dinner. The girls would be cooking, so he should get home as soon as possible. Line break. Are you ready, Issei-kun? Akeno asked, licking her lips in an extremely sexual way. Give me your best, Akeno-san. Issei nodded his head, but before Akeno could get too close to him, Issei raised both of his hands to stop her. Hold on a second, I need to remove these first. Issei removed the earphones from his ears, making all the sounds disappear, and there was nothing left but silence. Well then, Akeno raised her hand and touched his cheek, sending a massive pulse of electricity from her hand into his body. Gah! Ara tilde, she purred sultrily when Issei fell down, holding his cheek and his body in pain, as he was shocked for the first time in a while. I could really get used to this training with you every day, Issei-kun. She climbed onto his lap and linked her hands with him and shocked him again. Rias and her servants cringed when they heard Issei scream when he was shocked once again, followed by a sadistic laughter belonged to Akeno. Seriously, of all the people, Raynare growled, glaring at Rias, it has to be that sadistic woman. You seriously think that Issei-kun is going to be alright after this? They had Asia there to ensure nothing would happen to their beloved knight, but it didn't change the fact that he would be shocked a lot from then on, and each shock from a woman like Akeno, who very into BDSM, would definitely hurt. A lot. She's the best option we can come up with, Raynare. Rias shook her head. Akeno is a magic expert, Raynare, especially in lightning magic. She can shock him with a non-life-threatening surge of electricity with the minimum magic power. She picked out a scroll of paper from her skirt pocket, something Issei's grandfather gave her before he disappeared mysteriously once again, and unfolded it. In order to wield Sugary no Ontachi again without getting any side effect, we need to get eyes to get used to electricity once again. And Hayato Oji-sama stated very clear that being struck by lightning rapidly is the fastest way. It's like sitting on an electric chair. Kiba smiled nervously while scratching his cheek. Only this time, that chair is sitting on you and keeps promising many, many shocks next.
Hold on a second there.
I thought we had to prevent Issei-kun from getting into fights. Of course. Then why is he here? Training so that he can use that lightning blade, which he will use it to fight, Raynare pushed on. As much as I don't want to admit it, it's not something we cannot prevent completely. One way or another, battles will keep coming and Issei will have no other choice than to fight. Rias shook her head sadly. We can only stop Issei from fighting for too long, or getting sucked into his fighting spirit. Aka get him strong enough to one-hit everything and end the fight in a few seconds. The other sweat dropped when they saw the exact same words on the note Hayato left for Rias, with a peace sign next to it. Sugary will provide him the power to do so, but Aizen in no condition to use it yet. So, let a sadistic woman shock him rapidly is a great idea. The Ferengi are descendants of those who were blessed by Shinto gods, so they all pose higher physical abilities than usual, even for supernatural beings standard. As you can see, no human, or even most high-class devils, are capable of doing feats like Oji-sama. Rias explained. Issei is no exception. It's also the reason he was able to survive such injuries from that accident 10 years ago. So that's mean he have to withstand Sugary's power while using it. It's a bit risky to use that sword. Even the past wielders had to endure its power, because none of them was able to fully control the sword. Even Jai-sama? Asia asked in surprise. Yes, even him. Rias trailed off before returning her attention to her beloved knight, as he was trying to hold on for dear life after getting struck by a full bolt of lightning. Rias bit her bottom lips when she heard his cry of pain, yet, okay, maybe this is getting overbroad. Issei reached his hand out to grab one of his earphones and put it on his left ear while reaching his right hand out to stop Akeno from continuing. Wait, Akeno-san, I think it's enough for... But before he could finish his sentence, his eyes nearly buggled out of his sockets when his hand landed directly on Akeno's right breast, getting a handful of her incredible soft and firm tit. Such action caused the sadistic queen to moan lustfully and got turned on even more than before. Ara, Issei-kun, how bold of you. She licked her lips and grabbed his cheeks with both hands. Issei closed his eyes tightly and waited for the shock. But it never came. You turned me on so much. How about I reward you for being such a good boy? How about I let you hurt me this time? Did you know that I enjoy being hurt just as much as hurting someone else? She whispered into his ear before licking his cheek, making the unfortunate or fortunate boy shudder. Issei was speechless and didn't know what to say. But luckily, Rias came to the rescue and stopped Akeno from doing anything more extreme by grabbing the collar at the back of her shirt and pulled her up to her feet. All right, I think that's enough for today. The crimson-haired young woman stated with a dead calm tone. Eyes, are you all right? Why, yes. Issei nodded his head slowly and took Raynare's hand so that she could pull him to his feet. My hair is a bit weird, isn't it? He asked, and the girls nodded their head with a giggle. Here you go. Raynare put both of her hands on his head and gently pressed his hair down, returning it back to its original style. Asia stepped closer to her friend and placed her hands on his hip, covering them in healing light. Thank you, Asia. Issei smiled when the blonde-haired girl started healing him with her sacred gear, making him feel a lot better than before. Think you can keep this up, Eyes? Rias asked. I don't think this kind of training is good for your health. I think I can't, Buchu. Issei nodded, but he wasn't so sure himself. Please, you don't have to worry about me. Of course I have to. Rias scolded him lightly. You're my knight, Eyes, and nothing is going to change that. Thank you, Buchu. He could only smile at her. Line break. Issei would never expect his grandfather to randomly appear at his home when he and Rias decided to bring everyone to his home to have a meeting and use dinner with his family like that. And this is a picture of Eyes when he began his training. The man laughed loudly while pointing his finger to a picture on the album he was holding. The old but extremely muscular man spent most of the afternoon adding pictures that he brought with him from Mai into the Hayato family's albums, and then decided to show them to everyone. Ara, he is so cute. Akeno giggled from Hayato's left, using the palm of her hand to cover her mouth. And this is a picture when Eyes-chan went into the beach naked. Hayato flipped to the next page and showed them another picture, much to the brown-haired boy's displeasure. He couldn't remember much about his past after that accident 10 years ago, but it only made him feel more embarrassed. Hey, Akeno-san, hey Jai-chan, can you stop showing her those things? Ara, so this is Eyes-senpai's embarrassing past. You also can't look, Koneko-chan. It was basically the worst thing that ever happened to any teenager boy. Small eyes. Rias, who was kneeling at Hayato's right, muttered with a low tone. Her cheeks were red, and there was a happy smile on her face. Eyes when he was a child, Eyes when he was a child, Eyes when he was a child, Eyes when he was a child. She kept muttering in satisfaction, which only made Hayato's grin become wilder and Issei became more confused. I think I know how Buchu-san feels. Asia grabbed the older girl's hand. Her eyes were sparkling in excitement. So you also know how I feel. Rias nodded with a huge smile. I'm so happy. Ara, you look so cute, Eyes-chan. Raynare sighed softly, holding one of the family albums in her hands. No wonder why you are so handsome now. Not you too, Raynare-chan. He tried to take it back and jumped at her, but Raynare simply laughed and dodged to the side. Ha, don't worry about it. Let me enjoy your album a bit more. Sighing in defeat, Issei then turned his attention to the last person in the room, Kiba. But unlike everyone, he was staring blankly at the album in his hand, with his eyes wide in surprise. Hey, what's wrong, Kiba? Issei asked and looked at the only picture in the album. It was a picture of him and a young girl with a tomboyish hairstyle, standing beside each other with someone who seems to be her father. Like most of his past, Issei couldn't remember him, but he knew the girl from the stories his mother used to tell him when he was younger. She was the girl who used to live close by when Issei was in kindergarten, and usually came to his house to play hero play together. But when Issei went to primary school, she went to another country because of her parents' work. This, Kiba pointed at the boy's father on the photo. To be more accurate, he was pointing at the sword the girl's father was carrying. In the past, Issei thought it was just a fake sword, because he heard that the father used to play with them a lot in their hero play. "Do you remember this?" Kiba asked seriously. "I'm sorry, Kiba, but I don't remember much of my childhood." Issei shrugged before asking, "Why? What about it?" "Things like this happen, huh? To find it in an unexpected place." Kiba laughed by himself, but his eyes were filled with so much hatred that it made Issei feel surprised and a little nervous. "This is a holy sword." At that moment, Issei could never believe that photo was the start of a chain of events. Chapter 15. It was an evening, and the sky was beginning to darken. "I got this," Issei said loudly while taking a few steps, raising his hand above his head and catching the baseball in his gloved hand. Even though it was hit with a lot of force behind it, it was actually no big deal for him to catch, because in his eyes, the ball was flying extremely slowly, and when he caught it, he couldn't feel anything at all. "Nice, Issei-kun," Momo Momonozo, the one who hit the ball thrown by Rias, grinned and held up the baseball bat, pointing it at him. "At this race, we're so going to win the ball tournament." "Eyes, pass me the ball," Rias called out to him, and Issei only did just that, throwing it back to his mistress so they could continue training. You might wonder what his regular client was doing there, at Kyoto Academy, training baseball for the upcoming ball tournament with them, the Occult Research Club. The answer was pretty simple. Yesterday, she became a second-year student of Kyoto Academy, being transferred from Aminagawa High School by Ria's family, and quickly became a member of the Occult Research Club. Despite the fact that she wasn't a devil, Rias still accepted her in and allowed her to know about devil's business. Apparently, being the holder of boosted gear, she was known as Sekyuute, the Red Dragon Emperor, or Empress, and was deeply respected by the members of the devil faction's higher status. As soon as they heard about Momo, they had been trying almost everything to have her at their side. Even some high-class devils had come to her house to ask her to become their servant, promising her many generous profits, until Momo politely refused after slamming the door of her apartment right into their face, summoned boosted gear to scare some, and Sirzechs Lucifer and Gremory household decided to put her under their care. When she arrived at his class yesterday, Issei had also learned about her other life, and that she was also extremely famous in the human world. She was well known among them as Kamen Rider Pinky, the main protagonist in the TV series of Kamen Rider Pinky, and one of the more successful gravure idols in the world of entertainment. With her particularly seductive body, Matsuda and Motohama were two of many of her fans, and in their efforts of try to get Issei to their side, they used to show him a picture of Momo in a rather skimpy two-piece swimsuit, and it became the reason why Momo looked familiar when they first met. Issei had never bothered to watch anything on TV because of his handicap, so of course he couldn't recognize her. Next week is Kyoto Academy's ball tournament. "It's a battle between clubs that we can't lose," said Rias with a firm voice. She was in high spirit. One of the Academy's biggest events, the ball tournament, was closing in. Overall, it was an event where they was going to play ball-related sports, such as baseball, soccer, basketball, tennis, and many sports like that. Those matches included contests between classes, genders, and obviously, there were also some between clubs, and that, including the Occult Research Club. However, what the clubs actually play would be announced on the day of the event, and in conclusion, they were practicing sports likely to arise. Training in the morning, lecturing at school, and practicing sports with his friends and doing devil's jobs at night. His stamina allowed him to do all of that in a single day without getting tired in the slightest. His daily life sure had become a lot more interesting than before, as long as it wasn't going to involve fights and battles. Batting practice is fine now. If it's baseball, then Koneko will be the fourth batter. "All right," the small girl with super strength nodded, and replied shortly. No one was going to complain about that. "Yufufufu, it seems our Buchu is in high spirit," said Akeno-san while giggling, appearing next to Issei. "I think I understand." Issei nodded his head. She hates to lose, after all. She had always had that burning look in her eyes whenever she was about to enter a competition. Yep, that's it. Of course, there's no way that we can lose unless we make mistakes. As devils who were fundamentally stronger than most humans, on the sports day they would have to hold back. Naturally, they wouldn't have a hard match, but on the flip side, they had to learn the rules and features of baseball, which was the reason why Ria's making them practice. The only one that would get physical problem would be Momo, but it wasn't something they should worry about since she was really good at sports and had good reflex and above-average stamina. Even if your brain knows, your body has to as well, Rias declared before returning her attention to Momo, holding the baseball ball behind her back. Momo, are you ready? As ready as I will ever be, Buchu. The girl nodded and raised her baseball bat. Well, I won't when Hakiruyuku arrive, but Rias threw the ball and once again, Momo delivered a successful hit to the ball, sending it into the air. Asia, it's on you, Rias called to the bishop, who became extremely nervous when she saw the ball flying toward her direction. Han, ow, 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 ow. Ah, she was too slow, so the ball hit the ground and bounced for a few times before going through Asia's legs. Needless to say, her sports sense was below exceptional. Combining to her clumsiness, she could even trip over nothing. Asia, if you fail to catch it, go fetch it, Rias gave out her order firmly. Why, yes, she quickly ran after the ball and picked it up before tossing it over to Rias. Next is Yuyudo. Momo nodded her head and hit the ball again, that time toward Kiba. There you go, Buchu hit the ball to Kiba. Since he was second fastest runner in their group, Issei believed it should be the piece of cake for him. Smack. However, much to everyone's surprise, including Issei, Kiba just stood there like an idiot and got hit in his head. Kiba, get a hold of yourself, Issei said loudly to Kiba, who then looked at him with a puzzled expression. Sorry, I wasn't paying attention. Kiba picked up the ball and threw it back to Rias. She caught it with a sigh. Yuyudo, what's wrong? You've been acting rather strange lately. It's not like you. I'm sorry. The pawn sincerely apologized. Rias was right. Kiba had been thinking about something serious lately. Even during discussions in the occult research club, he would look somewhere else and not participate. As a second-year student like him, Issei could even hear that it became a hot topic in his classroom, and the girls were worried, at the same time excited over his expression. For someone who was always smiling, it was rather unexpected. Issei could see that Kiba started acting strange after he saw the photo in one of the albums at his house, most likely because of the holy sword. Rias could only shake her head and picked up the baseball manual on the ground, checking if she was doing everything right. Ara. By the way, Aiz-kun, did you know? Akeno asked, looking at Issei with a smile. Know what? Recently, Buchu started a manual on love. A love manual? Issei asked in surprise. Does that mean she found someone that she likes? He asked, and Akeno could detect a hint of disappointment in his voice. Issei's fondness for Rias was something she could see from the first day he arrived at their clubroom. Yufufufu. Aiz-kun, you don't have to worry about it. It'll be all right. It's impossible for Buchu to have a lover while you're not around. Akeno reassured him, with a pat on his shoulder. If Buchu were in your shoes, she'd be deeply shocked. Yufufufu, it's also her first time. You'll be in trouble, Aiz-kun. He didn't understand what she was saying at all, so he asked. Okay, continuing. But before Akeno could keep going, Rias put the manual down and announced. Well, I guess I should return to my position now. Akeno nodded her head and left, but not before she whispered into his ear, I'll be looking forward to our next training session, Issei-kun. The boy shuddered, and couldn't help but consider about asking Raynare to help him train instead, since she was also really good at spells and magic, but wasn't a sadist. Line break. After they had finished lunches, Issei headed to the clubroom with Raynare, Momo, and Asia, since Rias told them to be there before noon. Apparently, Rias and Sona, the other high-class devil at Kyo Academy, Ria's best friend and rival, wanted to properly introduce the new members of their peerage to each other, since they had never had an opportunity like that before, mostly because of Raynare, her little gang of stray exorcists and fallen angels, as well as Ria's first ever raiding game against her former fiancé. When they entered the room, Sona Shitori, or Sona Citri, the heiress of the Citri clan and the sister of the Mau, Serafall Leviathan, and the president of the student council, was already there. Sitting next to her was Tsubaki Shinra, the vice president of the student council, a young bespectacled woman with long straight black hair that extends all the way down to her knees with split bangs and heterochromic eyes, with a violet left eye and a light brown right eye. The rest of the student council slowly made their way into the clubroom. Issei could recognize some of them, especially Matsuda, the infamous perverted baldy and sexual harassment paparazzi of Kyo Academy. The other male member of the student council, Sona's peerage, was Genshiro Saji, a young man with short blonde hair and gray eyes. He was wearing the Kyo Academy boys' school uniform, albeit without the blazer, and his sleeves are rolled up. Other than Saji, Issei and Raynare had already met Sona and the other two before, so they didn't feel surprised like Momo and Asia. "Oh, Momo-chan," Matsuda's expression lecherous as he tried to approach Momo, "I didn't know that you would." But before he could get any closer to her, Issei held his hand up slightly and stood in front of the Red Dragon Empress, giving Matsuda a firm glare, which immediately made him back off nervously. Momo, meanwhile, sighed in relief and gave Issei a soft smile. She had experienced with stalkers and pervert paparazzi in the past, but none of them was nearly as bad as Matsuda and his pervert partner. The Kaichu, Shitori Sauna-sama's real name is Sona Citri. She's a high-class devil who is the next heir of the House of Citri. Seeing the confusion on their face, Akeno explained, "The House of Citri is one of the 72 pillars that survived the Great War, just like the House of Gremory and the House of Phenex. This school is actually controlled by the House of Gremory, but at daytime, it is the student council. In other words, the House of Citri is in control. The time of being in charge is split between daytime and nighttime. You guys are getting peaceful school life because Kaichu and us, the devil servants of Citri, are working at daytime. It won't be bad for you to remember that, you know?" Saji explained before introducing himself. "By the way, my name is Saji Genshiro. I'm in second year, and I am Kaichu's pawn," he declared proudly and offered Issei his hand. "Issei Hyodu, Rias Gremory Sama's knight." Issei nodded and shook the pawn's hand. "So you're the same pawn as Matsuda?" "Yes, but actually, it damaged my pride very badly. For him, one of the duo perverts, to be the same pawn as me." What did you say?" Matsuda gritted his teeth in anger and glared at his fellow pawn. "Oh, you want to go at it again? Even if I look like this, I'm a pawn that consumed 4 pieces of pawns." The new member of Sona's peerage returned the glare with his own. "Even if I just turned into a devil, I won't lose against you or even someone like Hyodu." Their foreheads smashed against each other, and the two pawns glared into each other's eyes while gritting their teeth in anger. "Saji, Matsuda, stop it right now." Sona spoke up and glared at them sharply. "Boo, but Kaichu. The reason we came here is to introduce our new servants amongst fellow high-class devils where we both have this school as our base. In other words, it is a meeting to introduce you and Ria's new servants, Hyodu-kun, Raynare-san and Asia-san. If you are my servant, then don't make a shame out of me. Besides..." Sona then turned her head to look at Issei. "Saji, you can't win against Hyodu-kun right now. He is the one who defeated the third son of the House of Phenex. Being Ria's only knight was not just for show, you know." "Only knight?" Saji asked in shock, looking at Issei with his eyes wide. "That's mean you consumed 2 knights." The guardian of Ai's grand shine could only nod his head. "And you defeated the Phoenix. I thought that it was Kiba or Himejima-senpai who rescued Ria's senpai." Even Matsuda was in shock, and was looking at Issei with his mouth gasping like a fish on water. "What about Momo-chan? She's Ria's servant as well?" he asked, looking at the pink-haired young woman. "No, she is not." Sona shook her head. "She's here because she's Sekiruyute, the Red Dragon Empress and the holder of the legendary boosted gear." Both of Pawn's mouths dropped in shock, and Momo flipped her hair with a somewhat prideful smile. "I am sorry, Hyodu Issei-kun, Raynare-san and Asia Argento-san." Sona lowered her head at them. "My servant hasn't experienced as much battles as you two, so he still has some rude attitude in him. If it's okay, can you please get along with him?" "Yeah, we will." Raynare nodded and looked at Matsuda, who then immediately backed off and nearly tripped over when he saw her eyes, which greatly reminded him of the day she tried to kill him. There's a history between you two? As Saji approached Asia to greet her, Momo turned to her friend and asked curiously. Yeah, I tried to kill him. The young actress raised an eyebrow at that. Before becoming Butchu's servant, I was assigned by my leaders to watch over that boy, because they thought he had the boosted gear. After a while, I thought he might pose a threat to the fallen angel with that dangerous sacred gear, so I tried to kill him. Momo paled, but Issei-kun pushed him out of the way and got struck with my light spear instead. Butchu saved him by turning him into her servant. I see. She looked away, but then snapped her head back to look at Raynare. Hold on, if you knew I had the boosted gear from the beginning, would you try to put a light spear through your heart? Raynare asked teasingly. Of course, but now I probably won't. The Dragon Empress looked away and put her hand on her chest, sighing in relief. All right. Sona nodded and stood up. I think this is enough for introducing our rookies. Then we will pardon ourselves now. There's also a document which I want to finish during lunchtime. Kaichu Sona Citri-sama, I will be in your care from now. Issei spoke up and bowed his head at Sona. Following after her friend, Asia also did the same thing. Why yes, please take care of us. Yes, let's get along. The student president replied and smiled at them. She then turned her head around to look at Rias, who was enjoying the tea Akeno made for her with a smile on her face. Rias, I will be looking forward to the ball tournament, she said to her rival with a smile, before she left the room with her servant. Yes, me as well. Rias smiled back at her before saying to her new servants, get along with Saji-kun and Matsuda-kun, everyone. You will also meet the other members of the student council who are devils, but don't fight with them. Since we are all spending our school life at the same school. Okay, she smiled. Yes. And Raynare, Rias glared at Raynare with her eyes half lifted and a smile, stop scaring Matsuda. No promise. The fallen angel shrugged her shoulder. All right then. Rias looked at Issei and flashed him a bright smile. Eyes, come over here and teach me show more signs. Unlike Raynare, she still had some troubles conversing with Issei through sign language, making it really difficult for her to talk with him while they were at school. Oh, all right then. The knight nodded his head with a small smile and sat down beside her. I want to learn it as well. Asia quickly claimed the spot next to Issei and said determinedly. Me too. Momo said excitedly and took her seat in front of him. I want to learn sign language too, so teach me. Aiz-kun. Koneko nodded her head in agreement and leaned in closer to hear it, but she didn't say anything. Ara, then I will join in as well. Rias pouted when her queen decided to step in as well. Body language is very useful, to say the least. But the crimson-haired heiress knew that it was just an excuse for the sadistic queen to get close to her favorite toy. You don't mind me joining, don't you, Issei-kun? She gave him an innocent look, something that he couldn't refuse. It's fine, Akeno-san. Issei nodded and raised both of his hands. So, since Momo-chan and Koneko-chan are new, I will start with a basic. As he taught the girl his language, Issei couldn't help but glance at Kiba, who was still deep in thought, and wondered exactly what had happened to him to have that kind of reaction as soon as he saw the holy sword. Line break. Bang, bang. The sound of the start of the ball tournament echoed in the sky. Issei looked up and put a hand above his eyes to look at the sky. He could see some dark clouds approaching, and the weather broadcast said it was going to rain in the evening. He just hoped that it wouldn't rain until the tournament was finished, or else his master would get really upset, or his friends had to compete while it was raining. Tsukumoto-kun of the Manga Research Club, Hashioka-sensei is calling you. Please come to the staff room immediately. The PA speakers, which are placed throughout the school grounds, were making announcements endlessly. All of the club members got changed into the P uniform and gathered at one place. They were resting up till the start of the matches, but the club matches were at the end. First, there were the class matches. His class was going to compete in football, but Issei decided to not participate. Kiba and Koneko had to participate in their class match, which was baseball. The practice they did after school wasn't in vain. After that, there was a match amongst genders. Then after lunch, the club matches started. Issei did some light exercises as a warm-up and helped Momo with her own. Asia was stretching with the help of Raynare. Koneko was sitting on the plastic mattress on the ground reading the rule book for ball games. Kiba was still thinking about something. The boy had been spacing out for entire days, staring at the sky. Rias went to check the category sports for the club matches with Akeno. After 10 minutes, the two great one-sama of Kyo Academy came back while smiling fearlessly. "We have won this match already," she said. "Buchu, so what are the sports we are playing then?" Akeno asked. "Dodgeball." "Line break." "Buchawoo, come on, you can do it, beat her!" Momo cried as loud as she could, cheering for Rias from the tennis court fence. She was the one who represented the girls of her class to compete against other senior girls. She was holding her ground quite well, hitting the tennis ball with strength and flawless skill, but her opponent, Sonositri, was quite good as well. "Kaichu-sama wa, kaya!" The girls were shouting with a shrill voice. Issei was wearing a cap to push his hair down to cover the earphone on his left ear, so he could hear everything quite clearly, even with just one ear. "Yufufufu. It's wonderful that we can see a match between high-class devils in a place like this." Akeno giggled while enjoying the match beside Issei. The knight nodded his head in agreement, because while the two of them were holding back, it was rare for him to see a match between high-class devils at a place like school. "Here I come, Sona." "Yes, you may, Rias." The two beauties exchanged words, and their determination to win burned like a dragon fire. "Kaichou, please win," like the members of the Orc. Saji and the student council were also cheering from the opposite fence. "Take this, Shitori-style spin ball." The ball Sona had just hit went rushing towards Buchu, spinning rapidly in the air. "That can't be good." Issei muttered with a very low tone, his lips barely moved. "You are too naive. Take this Gremory-style counter." Rias tried to hit it back with her racket, but the ball changed its direction the moment it touched the court for the first time and went down, causing Rias to miss. 15 to 30 inches. "No, it is Kaichu's point." The girls, who was cheering for Rias, cried in disappointment. "You are doing well, Sauna. To be expected from my rival," Rias admitted with a smirk, gripping the racket's handle tightly in her hand. "Yufufu. Rias, you haven't forgotten the promise where the loser has to pay for the udon with all the toppings at Kobachiya, have you?" Sona asked, smiling slightly. "Yes, I haven't. It will be my shame if you taste that before me." Rias grinned and got into position. "That's why I will definitely win. Did you know that I have 108 styles of magic ball? I will accept that challenge. I will hit back all the balls that come into my Shitori zone." In the end, the final match between Rias Gremory and Sonositri lasted so long that both of their rackets broke and they both got first places. Of course, normal rackets would break if they were used for intense rallies like that. Everyone, including the referee, had decided that it was a tie, but Rias wanted to win at all costs, so the participants turned to the spectators to ask who the winner was. Sona had a lot of votes, but Occult Research Club still won in the end because they had more famous members in the group and many more fans. Line break. After the girls had changed into their P uniform, the team gathered together, and before they could head to the field, Momo brought out a small box from her backpack and showed it to everyone. "Everyone, let's put this as a team." She opened it and picked out some headbands, which had Embroidery Occult Research Club imprinted on them. "I made this last night, so hopefully you will like it." "Ada, you are well prepared." The first one to take it from her was Rias. Issei got one too and removed his earphone to put on the headband, tying a knot at the back of his head. "It's good," Koneko said shortly, but that was all Momo needed to know that the cute white-haired mascot of Kyo Academy really liked it. "I gotta admit, they're pretty well made. You're quite good at home economics, aren't you?" Raynare commented and put on her own headband. "I'm still lacking in some aspects, but you know I am really interested in this guy, so of course I have to practice a lot to improve myself." She explained and gave Issei a meaningful look, but all he did was look at her in confusion. He then quickly put on one of his earphones when Momo pointed at his ear. "Sorry, Momo-chan, but what did you just say?" he asked. Momo was still new to sign language, so he had to put it on to talk to her. "Oh, it's nothing, nothing at all." She nudged him gently with her elbow and winked. Rias crossed her arms underneath her chest and pouted, feeling a little annoyed at how fast Momo was advancing. She was also a little surprised and amazed that Momo could do it with little to no hesitate. Ara ara. Akeno giggled with the headband on her forehead. Certainly the other clubs are also wearing an item to symbolize the team, like uniforms and caps. That's right, Akeno-senpai. The pink-haired young woman nodded. That's why I also made them. She then looked at the box and widened her eyes when she saw there was one headband left. I'm pretty sure that I made just enough for everyone. She picked the headband up and looked around. Kiba-kun, you don't want this? She called out to the handsome pawn. But it fell into his deaf ear, and I thought he's a nice guy. Actually, he is. Give me that, Momo-chan. Issei offered his hand. Let me do it. The pink-haired girl nodded and gave Issei the headband. Hey Kiba, Issei called as he approached the Prince of Kyo Academy. Put this on. Momo-chan made these for us. And showed Kiba the headband. Yeah. Thanks, Momo-san. Kiba nodded his head at Momo. Let's concentrate on winning now. Win, huh? Yeah, winning is important. Kiba nodded, but Issei was sure that his mind wasn't in the game at all. Members of the Occult Research Club and the Baseball Club, please gather at the gym house. It was the announcement that called for them, and the Devils of Gremory household quickly got to the gym to start their match. Line break. Issei jumped to the left, caught the ball before it could hit Asia, the weakest member of their team, and sent it back to the owner, who got hit square in the head and eliminated from the match instantly. It actually wasn't that hard for him to catch the ball, and even Asia could do it if she had some more confidence, because the opponents were throwing it half-heartedly, with barely any strength behind. It was simply because they couldn't hit anyone from the Occult Research Club. Rias Gremory, one of the two Great Ones Sama, the most popular school idol. You can't aim for her. Akeno, one of the two Great Ones Sama, the second most popular school idol, can't aim for her as well. Momo Momonozo, gravure idol and famous actress of Kamen Rider Pinky, the #1 beauty of Kyo Academy's second year. You will never want to hurt her. Raynare, also a school's beauty and everyone's idol, can't aim for her. Asia, the angel and one of the most beautiful girls of the second year, and also a blondie, couldn't aim for her either. Koneko, a lowly girl who was their school mascot, you'd feel bad if you hit her. Kiba Yudo, enemy of every male student in the school, but the girls will hate you if you hit him. Can't aim for him. Last but not least, Issei Hyodu, a handicapped second-year student. You'd feel really bad if you hit him, and the girls would definitely hate you for that. There was no way they could win against a team like that. Then suddenly, one big-built baseball boy came and aimed for Kiba, crying out for the entire school to hear, "Shit, I don't care whether I get hated, you damn handsome." He threw the ball at Kiba, but it wasn't something the second faster servant of Rias Gremory couldn't handle. That was Issei's thought, until he realized that the boy was still in his own word. Without a word, Issei ran toward that direction and knocked the ball before it could hit him in his face, which unfortunately counted as elimination. He could catch it, but in order to do that he would have to run faster, and that would be very inhuman in everyone's eyes. "I have the ball," Rias called out and caught the ball with one hand, letting him know what she was saying with the other. "You did well, eyes." She made the signs before pointing at the baseball boys. "Now, it's time to hunt down the prey who took down my cute eyes." She made a very scary glare and sent it directly toward the opponent team, making them flinch and back off nervously. Issei quickly moved out of the field and watched the entire match on a bench. His club was basically slaughtered the opponent team, and Rias was the one scoring the most headshots to revenge her cute servant. Line break. Slap. There was a bitter sound which echoed along with the sound of the rain. Rias just slapped someone. It was Kiba. Rias was quite angry. For the ball tournament, the Occult Research Club got the first place. Even Issei and Asia had returned to help with the rest. But there was one person who didn't cooperate, and it was Kiba. He did contribute a couple of times, but he was doing nothing most of the time. Rias got angry at him a couple of times during the match, but he didn't seem to care at all. Even if he got slapped, Kiba still didn't make any expression, nor did he talk. "Are you done now? The ball tournament has finished as well. We won't be practicing anymore, so can I take a rest until it's night time? I'm a bit tired, so I will take a break from the usual club activities. I'm sorry for my behavior today." Seems like I don't feel well today, Kiba said quietly and walked away in the rain. Kiba, you are really weird lately, Issei quickly caught up to his comrade and put a hand on his shoulder to stop him. It's none of your concern, Issei asked him, but all he got was Kiba's cold reply with a smiley face. Even I'm getting worried about you. Worried? Who worries about who? I think it's normal for devils to live by how they want. Well, I think I'm at fault for not listening to my master this time. It's troublesome a situation like this when we are trying to form a proper group. That's how we felt after we went through that bitter experience in the previous match. Remember, don't we have to cover for each other's weak points from now on? We are comrades. Comrades. Kiba then made a gloomy face. Yes, comrades, Issei nodded his head. You are always burning with determination, eyes kun. Lately I started to remember the basic things. Basic. Yeah, that's right. The reason why I am fighting. Isn't it for Butchu? But he rejected it immediately. No, I'm living so I can seek my revenge. Holy Sword Excalibur. Destroying that is the reason why I am living. Kiba had a face with a strong determination. That time, Issei thought that he had just seen his friend's real face. Chapter 16 inches. Holy Sword Project? Issei asked in surprise after hearing Ria's first words of explanation about Kiba and his current problem. Yes, Yuyuto is a survivor of that project. Rias nodded her head slowly at his words. The four of them, Issei, Rias, Asia and Raynare, were currently in his room. It was raining pretty hard outside, and as soon as they returned home, Rias had decided to tell all of them about the dark past of her pawn. I heard about that project from Azazel-sama, Raynare explained. There was a project several years ago inside the Christian church that aimed to make those who can wield the holy sword Excalibur. That's right. Rias nodded. Kiba was one of many test subjects. Rias said those words with disgust, and Issei understood why she felt like that. This is my first time hearing this, Asia exclaimed in both shock and surprise. There are demonic swords, swords that harness the power of demonic energy, and elemental swords, weapons that manipulate the elements of nature. Rias said, Holy Sword, as its name suggests, is weapon with the power of holy magic. They are the ultimate weapons against devils. If we, the devils, touch the holy sword, then we will burn ourselves. If we get cut by it, then we will be terminated without a trace. It could be called the ultimate weapon for those who believe in God and see devils as an enemy. Even though there are numerous holy swords originating from all over the world, I still think the most famous one would be Excalibur. Even in Japan, it comes up in many books. It's a holy weapon that is created through means of magic and alchemy by those who reach the territory of God. But holy swords choose their wielders. I hear that only one person in a decade or so get chosen. Kiba is a sacred gear possessor that can create demonic swords, right? So isn't there a sacred gear that can create holy swords instead? Issei asked curiously. Kiba's sacred gear, Sword Birth, had the power to create any kinds of swords with any kinds of attributes he desired, going from demonic swords with unique powers to elemental swords with elemental powers, like a lightning sword like Sugary no Antachi, if he had enough power to create something like that. It's not like there aren't, but if you compare it to the holy swords that already exist, it is kind of lacking. Of course, I'm not saying it's weak. Among them, there is a sacred utensil included in the Longinus, just like Momo's sacred gear, boosted gear. The most famous is the sacred gear that was wielded by the person who killed Jesus Christ, the true Longinus. It's also said that the name Longinus was derived from it. Rias paused for a second before continuing, except, at this point, there isn't a holy sacred gear that can compete with Excalibur, just like no lightning spells is able to compete with the power of Sugary. Maybe Durandal or Ama no Murakumo no Tsurugi can, but it's because these holy swords are too powerful. It's the same with the demonic swords and elemental swords. Yuyuto received artificial treatment to adapt to the holy sword, particularly the Excalibur. So Kiba is able to use the holy swords. Rias shook her head at Raynare's question. Yuyuto couldn't adapt to the holy swords. Not only Yuyuto, but it seems like everyone who received a treatment similar to Yuyuto's couldn't either. I guess you have to be a natural-born wielder. Issei nodded his head in understanding. The people of the church decided to view the ones who couldn't adapt to the holy swords as defective products and disposed of them. Both Issei and Asia widened their eyes in shock after hearing that. Dispose? Asia managed to utter some words, but too shocked to say anything else. Most of the people experimented on were killed, including Yuyudo, only because they couldn't adapt to the holy swords. It can't be. It's not an acceptable act by those who serve God. Asia spoke up once again, her eyes filled with tears and looked like she was about to cry. Issei could only look at her sadly. It's normal for one to cry when something she put her heart and soul believe in continuing to betray them. They, the people of the church, calls us devils and evil existence, but I think the bad intentions of humans are the greatest evil in this world. Rias ate it with sad eyes, and he couldn't agree more.
Rias was a devil.
Yet she was very kind to him, and everyone. When I reincarnated Yuyudo into a devil, that boy was swearing for his revenge even when he was in a critical situation. Because his talents were being used for holy swords since he was born, I wanted him to use his talents as a devil. Yuyudo's talent at using swords would be a waste for only using it for holy swords. But he couldn't forget about it, the holy swords, and also those who were involved with the holy swords and the people of the church. About that, I think this photo was what caused him to act like this. Issei spoke up and handed the photo to Rias. Kiba said the sword in this photo was a holy sword, so Issei thought it was somehow related. Ria's eyes changed as soon as she saw the photo. Raynare widened her eyes when she saw it, while Asia just looked on curiously. Eyes? Is there someone you know who is related to the church? You know I lost most memories of my childhood, right? Rias was about to say something, but Issei shook his head with a small smile. It's all right, Buchu. Anyway, from my mother's stories, it seems there was a child who was a Christian living in the neighborhood when I was really small, and usually came to play with me. So, there is one near you, Rias muttered before saying, no, there was a holy sword in this area about 10 years ago. It's so terrifying. Then that sword is really a holy sword. Yes, it's one of the holy swords. It's not as powerful as the legendary holy sword I mentioned before, but it's the real thing. Then it must mean that this man is the holy sword wielder. Now I get it. I heard that my predecessor who was in charge of this area vanished, but it would make sense if this was the reason. But if I remember, Rias looked away and started muttering many things under her breath, and Issei had no idea what she was talking about. However, before he could ask, Rias shook her head side to side and smiled at Issei. Let's just go to sleep. Her declaration made everyone widen their eyes in surprise. Even if we think about it, it's not like Yuyudo's behavior will go back to normal. She grabbed the sleeve of her shirt and pulled it over her shoulder, and after that, she started to strip her clothes until she was completely naked, much to his shock and embarrassment. Oi, what are you doing? Raynare asked loudly. Boo Buchu, why are you taking your clothes off here? His face was beet red, but he couldn't stop himself from staring. He was a young man with crazy hormone, all right. Why? You also know that I can't sleep without being naked, eyes. Rias pointed out like it was an obvious thing, crossing her arms under her large breasts. I know, he shook his head, but not that, I mean, why you are taking them off in my room. That's because I'm going to sleep with you. Again, she stated it like it was obvious, causing Issei to become speechless. Rias then leaned forward and hugged his head into her large bosom, making his face even redder than before. Don't tell me that you don't want to live with your one Sama, eyes. Are you going to spend me back to my room just like this? Stop right there. Raynare stepped in and tried to stop Rias from continuing to do whatever she was trying to do. You can't do that. It's not right. Last time I checked, it's not right for human and their society. The crimson-haired young woman pointed out, we're devil and we've no problem over something like this. It's also perfectly normal for me to show my deep affection to my adorable knight. Raynare crossed her arms on her chest and huffed. She wanted to retort to her words, but couldn't deny her logic and admitted that she did have a point. Then I'm sleeping here as well. I'm also going to sleep with Ai's-san. Suddenly, Asia spoke up and entered the fray. Much to his shock, she started stripping, going with her pajama shirt first before removing her pants as well, becoming just as naked as Rias much to his shock. Having enough, Issei decided to stop it before it could get any worse. Buchu, you are being a bad influence on Asia. Please put your clothes on now. She might be a devil then, but Asia was still a pure maiden. With Rias, a pure-blood devil, around, it would only be a matter of time before she was corrupted and tainted with dirty thoughts. It's the last thing he wanted for a girl like Asia, not to mention that she was also his friend. Bad influence? Rias Buchu frowned and raised her eyebrow at his words. That's a harsh thing to say to me. Eyes, you know that I sleep naked, right? You slept with me a number of times. This time it was Asia who responded to her words. Slept together a number of times. No Eyes-san and Buchu-san. The Twilight Healing wielder started to shake and get teary eyes because it was a big shock for her. Raynare-chan, please say something. He decided to turn to the last devil in the room and tried to get her to help him, as she was more responsible and reasonable than Rias. But much to his shock and the other two girls' surprise, Raynare started stripping as well. It was the first time he had seen Raynare's naked body and got to admit that she did have a very seductive body, with large breasts and womanly hip. I want to sleep with Issei-kun too, if you don't mind, she said. If she wanted to sleep with him, Issei cried in his head as his mouth was blocked by the soft flesh of Ria's heavenly breasts. All she would need to do was ask. There was no reason for her to start stripping like Rias or Asia. TCH, first Asia, now you. I guess I have more competitor than I thought. Rias said in annoyance, can you two please hand over Eyes for tonight? Nope, don't want to. Raynare replied blankly. Her breasts jiggled as she walked on her knees toward them, and no reason for me to do as well. I don't want to, too. I think I have the right to be spoiled by Eyes-san as well. I also want to sleep with Eyes-san. Rias pouted at their replies. It was clear that she wasn't pleased. Then let's make Eyes decide. She came to a conclusion and then turned her head down to look at him, giving him the look that was telling him to choose her. Her desire was so strong that he thought there was a force that was coming out of her eyes. Eyes-san, you will sleep with me, right? Asia asked him with sobbing eyes. Issei-kun, are you really saying no to me, after we have spent so much together? Raynare asked seductively. She no longer had that cute, innocent look, as it was replaced with something more mature and more erotic, which combined with her nakedness. It was a killing blow to Issei. He was in a tight situation and didn't know how to answer, or which girl should he pick. They were all his precious people, after all. Ara, before Issei could open his mouth, Rias, who was sitting on his lap with her knees straddling him, said in surprise when suddenly she felt something big and hard pocking against her ass. It seems our boy is excited. She cooed excitedly and caressed his cheeks. Eyes, if you ever need help relieve the stress, feel free to ask me, okay? He could only nod his head. His face was so red that he felt like he was about to pass out in embarrassment. Rias had already seen all of his body the night she healed him from his injury, and to say she was impressed was a huge understatement. Issei, meanwhile, was thinking about taking a cold bath before going to bed, as his erection would probably bother him in his sleep. It would definitely refuse to stay with three naked, incredibly beautiful and attractive young women sleeping next to him in the night. Line break. Ara, Eyes-kun, you look pale. Is there any problem? His earphones had been renewed and made from insulating materials, so he could hear Akeno very clearly. Issei was currently in a room on the second floor of the old school building, which was used by Akeno. He heard that it used to be a classroom, but after the new school building was built and the school became co-ed for both male student and female student, it became Rias and the Occult Research Club's property. There was a tatami Japanese flooring on the floor, and it looked like a traditional Japanese room, but reinforced with magic barriers and enchanting spells to make sure to keep what happening inside. Akeno was extra daring today, as she walked toward Issei and placed a hand on his cheek, blowing him a kiss before shocking him with her lightning-based magic, sending surge of electricity through his body. She had an innocent smile when she approached him, but it was turned into a sadistic and cruel smirk when she heard his cry of pain. Just when he thought he had gotten used to 300 volts of electricity, Akeno tripled the electrical power to 900 volt, with enough power to shock him to the core and knock him back several feet. If he was normal human, he would have died long before Akeno decided to increase the power of her magic. Ah, you're so cute when you scream like that, Issei-kun. Akeno put a hand on her cheek and cooed excitedly, licking her lips while drool was trickling down the corner of his mouth, giving her an extremely sexual look. You're turning me on so much. She clicked her fingers and a yellow magic circle appeared above his head, sending a large bolt of lightning down Issei. Feeling the power and danger behind it, the knight quickly dodged, and the lightning missed him by inch. But he could feel the intense electrical powers very clear. Yes, run, one struck him on the back, and it shocked him to the core, knocking him down to the ground face first. Akeno-san, I think. Akeno was becoming crazier and crazier with each training session they took together. The sweet and gentle one Sama had disappeared and replaced by a vulgar woman who was extremely into BDSM. At first, he thought it couldn't be that bad, but when he saw the way she laughed and touched herself when he cried in pain, Issei didn't know who the real Akeno Himejima was anymore. We still have 45 minutes left, Issei-kun. Akeno wiggled her index finger around and gave him a seductive smile. And you can believe that I'm going to make the last 45 minutes of today's training totally worth it. Electricity cracked between her fingers. Her eyes shone dangerously as she looked at Issei with lust. Crazy woman. Issei muttered while picking himself to his feet. Give me your best shot, he cried, and was immediately struck in the chest, sending him across the room. Never mind, the handicapped knight muttered. However, Issei had no idea that hurting Issei and making him cry out in pain was currently only half enough for Akeno. How about this, Issei-kun? She then got a brilliant idea. Akeno clicked her finger, summoned a wooden sword and threw it to Issei, who caught it while looking at her in confusion. Tell you what, if you can cut down a piece of clothes on my body, I will reduce the time by 10 minutes. Issei was speechless and overall he didn't know how to react. You're out of your mind, Akeno-san, the knight said. There's no way I'm going to do that. He had already had a rogue night with the members of Hyodu residence. There was no way he would try to bring more troubles to himself. Let's see. Akeno ignored his words and looked at herself. Ara, I am wearing a shirt, a skirt, a bra and a panty. It seems you'll have to strip me naked, Issei-kun. Akeno giggled at the idea. Issei, meanwhile, didn't feel that happy. Don't tell me you don't like the idea. I heard that you slept naked with Rias, Asia-chan and Raynare last night. You must have had some great view of their bodies already, so it's only fair for me to have you look at mine as well. Issei had an urge to face palm after hearing that. What do you say, Issei-kun? Do you want to end this session quickly? Just so you know, sadistic or masochist, it really doesn't matter to me. I can be both, or I can be one of them, depend on your choice. Issei once again, had to make a hard decision. A part of him didn't want to end his training that quickly, because he wanted to use sugary no-on-tachi without any drawback. However, the other part of him wanted to end it as soon as possible, because Akeno was starting to freak him out with her strange taste. Plus, he had been training for 2 hours straight anyway. Issei took a deep breath and stood up, picking the wooden sword up with him as well. Now that is a real man. Akeno giggled and made a come-over gesture with her fingers before raising her hand above her head, summoning a large magic circle that promised a massive bolt of lightning, or even multi of them. Go on, attack me. Issei rushed forward the same time Akeno brought her hand down. The knight moved with extreme speed and moved his body to the side to dodge the lightning bolt. In a blur, Issei went past Akeno and stopped himself by dashing one knee and hand on the floor, with Akeno's panty hanging on the tip of his sword. In a blink, Akeno's uniform was separated into pieces and fell freely to the floor, leaving her standing completely naked in the middle of the empty classroom. Issei had cut her clothes with a wooden sword with speed not even the queen's eyes was able to follow. Looking at the small, triangle pieces of her uniform lying on the ground, Akeno couldn't believe that he was able to cut her clothes without gazing her skin accurately like that. His skills amazed her and turned her on at the same time. Akeno-san, without turning around, with the wooden sword, Issei gave Akeno her panty back. I think this is yours. Ara, Issei-kun. Akeno giggled and said with a flirtatious tone of voice, don't be shy, just turn around and take a peek at my body. I don't mind at all, really. I don't think you're that unfamiliar with a woman body, right? She took the panty away from his wooden sword and threw it away. Thank you Akeno-san, but I think I will pass. As tempting as it sounded, Issei decided to be a gentleman instead. He was also a knight. He had to act nobly. Asia and Raynare-chan are probably waiting for me, so. But before he could leave, Akeno walked to Issei and wrapped her arms around his waist, hugging herself close to him while leaning her face against his back. Akeno-san. I like you, Issei-kun. Eh? Yes. First I thought of you as a cute junior, but it's different lately. My feeling for you has been starting growing ever since I witnessed you in battle for the first time. The way your eyes harden when you wield your weapons, the way you cut down enemies with your swords, the way you enjoy a fight, all of them made a huge impact on me. Issei-kun, you fight with grace and skill, as well as something else I have never seen before. Even I will be aroused if I see a man fighting wonderfully like that. Aroused? Issei's sweat dropped at her choice of words, but didn't feel surprise. Ufu. Sometimes I think about you and the area around my breast gets hot, and I can't help it. But when I try to make you enjoy your training, they both chuckled at that. The instinct of a bully inside me rises. The more I hurt you, the more I get turned on and the lower I fall. Issei-kun, is this love? Love? Did she just say love? Was Akeno Himejima, the second most adored one Sama of Kyo, in love with him? But if I lay my hands on you, Rias might get mad. That person truly sees you. Yufufu, you are a sinful man, Issei-kun. Issei was then turned around and pushed against the wall by Akeno, who then stepped forward and pressed her large breasts against his chest. Issei was trying his best not to stare, and kept his attention to her beautiful purple eyes. Do you want to have an affair with me? A affair? Why? It's not like I'm in love with someone. Actually, he had a crush on Rias, his master, the woman who saved him and changed his life. It was a really big crush, but it wasn't like she was his girlfriend or anything. He didn't even know if she would return his feeling if he ever confessed to her. The gap between them was too large. She was Rias Gremory, a pure-blood devil and the heiress of Gremory household, sister of Mao while he was a servant. He was her knight, yes, but it didn't change that he was just a low-class devil. And did he need to mention that he was deaf as well? So, you're rather obvious of that, aren't you? Akeno giggled and put her arms around his neck. But that mean my chance is still high. She said with a smile, I also want to experience at least once, to get devoured by a younger boy. I also have masochism within me as well. I think it's about a good time for having a man inside me now for once. Her words made his head spin. Was she talking about sex just now? Akeno-san, are you perhaps? He began with an unsure tone. Yes, I'm a virgin. Yufufu. Issei-kun would be more experienced, so I would be happy if you lead me. And no, I also don't have any experience. He shook his head and Akeno made a shocked expression at his confession. That's a big surprise. I thought that you and Buchu had already. No, we haven't, Issei denied it immediately, shaking his head after realizing what the black-haired queen wanted to say. Why do you think it like that? Ara, is Buchu taking it slow? Then have you done it with Asia-chan, or is it Raynare? Of course not, they're my friends. Akeno giggled at his words, but frowned when she realized the story behind them. If it's Issei-kun, I thought that Buchu would have given you a big treat every night. This is certainly surprising. She said before looking at him in the eyes, so, what do you say, Issei-kun? Want to have an Arthur Guinevere Lancelot kind of relationship with me? But of course with a happier ending since the queen and king are both female. Should he give it a try? His feeling for Rias might not ever be returned, yet Akeno was standing right in front of him, naked, literally telling him that she was in love with him, and wanted to have a relationship with him. He didn't understand the secret part, the big treat, or the Arthur Guinevere Lancelot relationship, but decided to leave it for later, since he wasn't too familiar with that story. Akeno-san Issei then suddenly grabbed her shoulders and looked at her in surprise, making Akeno widen her eyes at his sudden action. At that moment, he could no longer see the mature and sadistic woman, but a young, innocent woman who was curious and rather emotional toward love, just like any teenager girls her age. Why, yes. Would you like to? Would you like to what? Issei stopped when he heard that voice. Akeno. What's the meaning of this? Indeed, when he turned his head to the side, Issei saw Rias standing just a few feet away from them. She was glaring at him angrily, with her hands on her hips and a dangerous crimson aura around her body. Buchu, but Akeno put a hand on his lip, stopping him from saying anything to his master. Ara, we were just training, like usual. Akeno answered unconcernedly and had her smile on. Is that so? But Rias wasn't convinced at all. But no matter how you look at it, weren't you trying to do something beyond that? And care to explain to me that you're naked? And why does it look like Issei have a hand in this? Ara, I wasn't thinking of doing it. Akeno giggled, and yes, it's him who stripped me, with that wooden sword. Amazing, right? He could cut my uniform and underwear into pieces in a blink of an eye, stripped me to my birth suit, and yet I didn't feel anything. Rias growled angrily at that. TCH, even if you weren't, there is a limit. Even I haven't. Isn't that because you are taking it slow? It might be good reading a book about it, but it won't go as smoothly as in the manual. Akeno smiled. You have to be bold, Rias, and take your opportunity as soon as you see it. They weren't glaring, but Rias and Akeno were looking at each other in the eyes. Somehow he could feel the intensity. Rias then walked to Issei and glared at him heatly. She raised her hand and pinched his cheek hard. Eyes, it seems like you were having fun. Did you get close to the Akeno one-sama that you admire so much? She asked, with half-lifted eyes. Whoa, W1. Then do whatever you want, idiot. Rias made an angry face and left the room, slamming the door violently behind her. Issei could only stand there and look at the spot Rias was standing a few seconds ago in confusion. It was the first time he made his king that angry, so he didn't know how to react, especially when he didn't know the reason behind it. Jealousy? She sure is cute. Akeno giggled, Yufufufu. Eyes-kun, it seems like you are making progress in your relationship. He turned back to look at Akeno, who summoned her gym clothes and started putting them on. Akeno-san, about the... Again, Akeno placed a finger on his lips, stopping him from saying it. You can leave that for later, Issei-kun. Akeno smiled. Are you sure? I really... Don't worry, Issei-kun. Akeno shook her head with a soft smile. I put up the courage to say all those things to you, so that's enough for today, for the both of us. The black-haired queen then said, You should follow Rias now. You don't want her to get angry at you because of me, do you? Yeah, you're right. Issei opened the door and was about to run after Rias, but stopped and turned his head back to look at Rias' queen, Akeno-san. Yes? Thank you. He lowered his head at her. I will definitely see you later. He waved and ran away, chasing after the angry Gremory. Akeno stood in the abandoned classroom, with a soft smile on her face and a hand over her chest, feeling her strong heartbeat. Line break. See you later, Momo-chan. Issei waved his hand to the pink-haired dragon empress before turning his attention to Rias. Buchu, aren't you going home? I will be going home afterwards. Go home without me, Rias said without bothering to look at him. Then, I will be going. He lowered his head a little and grabbed his backpack. He was a bit surprised and sad that he was being treated like that by Rias, who so far had shown him nothing but kindness. The knight couldn't help but wonder if dogs who were scolded by their master felt like that as well. Isn't Buchu-sen going home with us? Asia asked curiously as she stood waiting at the door waiting for him with Raynare. Yeah, I guess. Issei nodded, turned his head around to look at Rias and saw that she was still pretty much the same. Did you do something? Raynare asked suspiciously when the three of them left the room. She was quite angry during club's meeting. Did something happen? No, but it's my fault. I think I will apologize to her afterwards. Asia, Raynare-chan, you don't have to worry about it. He shook his head and said with a small smile. He tried to apologize to her, but since he didn't know what exactly did he do wrong, he couldn't get the right apology and failed miserably, and only got Rias to become even angrier. I understand, but it might be my fault. Lately I have been talking back to Buchu-san. Asia said it with an apologetic voice. Don't think of it like that, Asia. Raynare told the blonde-haired girl with a soft smile. I have been talking back to her too, remember last night? If she was angry with you, she would be angry with me too. It's my fault. Issei said it with a heavy sigh, and put his hands into his pocket. He had never had a friend before, so he hardly understood how they felt, and how to react when they were angry at him, especially when one of his friends was also his mistress. He was Ria's servant, knight or not. He had to make her feel pleased. If he wasn't able to do that, then he would be a disappointment as a servant and a disgraceful knight. When Issei tried to open the front door for him and the girls while removing his earphones, he suddenly felt something very bad. Shiver. His sword was in his hand in less than a second and Issei had his guard on. It was a signal for warning him of extreme danger. The last time he felt like that was the time when he met Asia for the first time and took her to the church. Raynare was half-fallen angel, wielding the power of holy light, so she wasn't affected by it as much as he was. However, she was also sweating and trembling slightly. Asia got it the worst, and she grabbed his hand with her shaking hands to find protection and comfort. Issei squeezed her hand tightly and put a finger on his lip before slowly opening the door. However, much to his surprise, he heard laughter from the living room. And this is a picture of Eyes when he was in primary school. Look. This is the picture when his togs got ripped at the swimming pool. It was very troublesome. He went to the pool's slide with his togs ripped. Issei turned his head back to look at Raynare, but the only reply he got from her was a shrug of the shoulders. He took a deep breath and removed his headphones and put the sword away, but didn't lower his guard in the slightest. He walked into the living room and widened his eyes when he saw two unfamiliar women sitting around his mother. They were both young foreigners with a rosario hanging around their chest, and looked about his age. One had chestnut-colored hair, and the other one had blue hair with a green mesh and a rather steel-hard eyes. Both of them were quite beautiful and were wearing a white robe. By the way they behaved, Issei could tell they were no ordinary people. "Welcome back, Issei-chan." His mother smiled at him and made the sign with her hands, putting the album down. The girl with chestnut hair smiled and waved her hand at him. She then put her hand on her chest and said something, but of course he couldn't hear it. "Nice to meet you." Issei greeted her with a fake smile. "Huh? Don't you remember? It's me?" The girl repeated her words. "He's deaf, Irina." The one with blue-haired said, "He can't hear you." "Oh my, I'm so sorry." Irina looked horrified and bowed her head to him apologetically. Midori then opened the album and showed them a picture. It was the same picture with the holy sword Kiba saw a few days ago. Issei widened his eyes in surprise after he saw the young, tomboyish girl standing in a heroic pose next to him in the picture. She was Shidou Irina, his childhood friend. Chapter 17 inches. "I'm so glad that you are all safe," Rias said in relief as she brought all three of them in a tight hug, with Eyes being the one between Asia and Raynare. Irina and the other girl had left their house after talking with them for nearly 30 minutes. Shidou Irina had come to Japan after a long time and apparently came back to Kyoto town because it was the town she lived in as a child. She also told Issei that she went to England because of her parents' work, making Issei believe that her parents, no doubt, related to the church. The three of them tried not to get too involved with them and left the talking to Midori, especially since Asia didn't want to get in contact with people related to the church. Issei would fight them if anything was to happen, but he was glad that they didn't come to his house with hostile intentions. After that, Rias returned home and with a pale face, just like Asia and Raynare. "Are you injured? I think they knew about us being devils, but I think they couldn't lay a hand on us in a normal residence and especially in front of your mum who is a normal human." She asked them and Asia answered with a shake of her head, smiling softly. "Both Eyes-san and I are safe, Buchu-san." Rias released them, but she refused to let go of Issei and tightened her arms around his body, hugging him as if he was a valuable thing. "Eyes, I'm so glad you're safe. If something were to happen to you, Raynare and Asia, after the normal club activity I was called in by Sona and was told the story about people related to the church intruding the town. And I also heard that they have a holy sword with them." When Rias got close to the house, she realized the abnormal presence and came rushing in with a look of horror on her face. She also confessed that she thought of the worst when she entered the house and felt the presence of an incredible powerful holy power. "I thought that the worst might have happened to my cute servants. I prepared for the worst scenario, you know? If I were to bid farewell to you after we had an argument, then I would have regretted it till death." I'm sorry. I should have treated you with more importance. It's all right, Buchu, Issei said comfortingly, giving her a strong smile. You know that I won't let anything happen to them, or myself, right? But Rias looked like she wasn't convinced by his words. It's still not stopping me from worrying about your safety, Rias said and gave another sigh of relief, shredding a tear after confirming her servant's safety. Buchu-san. Asia spoke up nervously, I'm also sorry for talking back to you. I thought that Buchu-san would take Ai's-san away from me. I thought that I couldn't win. She apologized and looked away. Rias just smiled and patted Asia on her head. It's okay. Rias then wrapped her arms around her bishop. So, do you have any idea what they are doing here? Raynare asked, crossing her arms under her chest. Well, according to Sona, who had met those two at noon, they want to negotiate with me, who has this town as her territory. Excuse me, are you saying that the people from the church want to negotiate with Devil? Raynare asked in disbelief, and Rias nodded her head at that. Then is it a pact, or is it a request? I'm not sure, but they are planning to come to the club room after school tomorrow. They apparently promised God that they won't attack us. Can we believe them? Issei asked curiously. He didn't remember anything about Irina, but he heard that they used to be best friends. He didn't have that many friends in his life before. He would really hate it when he had to fight her. We have to. We have to believe in their belief since they are the believers of God, and they are coming to request something from devils, when we are supposed to be evil beings to them. They seem to be under pressure, and it's certain that it's trouble. I have a bad feeling about this. From their story, the priests that come to this town keep getting killed. Ria's eyes became sharp and made a serious face. Issei could only nod his head at that. Even someone who was new to the supernatural world of the three great factions could feel something big coming. Line break. Recently, the holy swords Excaliburs that were kept by the Catholic Church Headquarter Vatican, Protestant Church, and Eastern Orthodox Church were stolen. The next day after school, the members of Gremory Group were gathered in the clubroom. On the sofas were Rias, Akeno, and the two guests, who were said to be priests. The other members of their group, including Momo, were sitting in the corner of the room, listening to their conversation. Ever since Irina and her partner, the blue-haired young woman with green streak, came to the clubroom, they couldn't stop feeling something really, really bad. Their instincts as devils were telling them that they were extremely dangerous. Rias and Akeno were talking to them with a serious face, but the one who was the most emotionally affected by their presences was Kiba, as he was glaring at them grudgingly. Issei didn't know what was going to happen if he lost it, but Issei was sure that it wasn't going to be pretty. The first one to talk was Shidou Irina, and her words made them all widen their eyes in surprise. Excaliburs? Like the sword in the stone? Momo turned to Issei and asked with a surprised tone. The same one? Issei nodded his head. But why did she say Excaliburs? I thought it's sword, not swords, but Momo wisely stopped speaking and stayed quiet when Raynare signaled her to do by putting a finger on her lips. Excalibur itself doesn't, or at least no longer exists. The one who answered Momo's doubt was Rias, who heard her second question for Issei and decided to answer it. I'm sorry, Momo and one of my servant are new to the world of three great factions, so can we continue this conversation while explaining about Excalibur? Irina nodded at Ria's request, though she was rather curious when Rias didn't call Momo her servant like Issei. Rias then turned to look at them and said simply, Eyes, Momo. Excalibur broke in the war a long time ago. Both of them widened their eyes in surprise after hearing that. Now it looks like this. The young woman with blue hair and green mess spoke up and got her weapon, which was covered in cloth, and revealed it to me. What appeared was a long sword. It appeared as a two-handed sword with a grip long enough that can be held with 3 hands, with a cross in the pommel. It contained an axe-like guard and a second grip with a chain-like form connecting the guard with the blade itself being huge and long that ends with 3 points. This is Excalibur. The moment Issei looked at it, he felt something really cold running through my body. It was an ugly feeling, and no matter how much he tried to deny it, it was the first time he felt that kind of chill in his life, and couldn't stop himself from imagining a certain death just from a sleight of touch. Excalibur was broken into pieces during the war a long time ago. The fragments were collected and turned into a new form by alchemy. It was made into 7 swords. This is one of them. The girl with blue hair said, "The Excalibur I hold is Excalibur Destruction. It's one of the 7 holy swords that were created. The Catholic Church is in control of it." She then put the sword away by wrapping it with the white cloth, which had many spell symbols on it. Irina also took out something that looked like a long rope, which started to move as if it were alive and changed its shape right in front of them and turned into a long katana. Mine is Excalibur Mimic. I can change its shape into anything I want, so it's really useful for carrying around. Just like this, each Excalibur has its unique ability. This one is in the possession of the Protestant Church. Irina, there's no reason to tell these devils the ability of Excalibur, is there? Xenovia. Irina giggled before saying confidently, "Even if they are devils, we still have to form a trustworthy relationship with them in this situation. Also, even if my sword's ability is revealed, I won't fall behind all the devils here." Rather than listening to Irina's confident speech, Issei turned his head to Kiba, who was emitting a rather scary presence. He was glaring at the Excaliburs and the 2 young women with a scary face that he had never seen before. So what does the stolen Excaliburs have to do with this country located in the east of the world? Rias continued to talk with the same attitude. The Catholic Church was in possession of 2 Excaliburs, including mine. Xenovia answered, not backing down from Ria's eyes, and returned it with her own glare. The Protestant Church also had 2. Also in the Eastern Orthodox Church there were 2 as well. The last one went missing in the previous war between God, devils, and fallen angels. 1 Excalibur was stolen from each church. The ones that stole them escaped to Japan and brought them to this town. Looks like my territory is full of incidents. So who are the ones that stole the Excaliburs? The ones that stole them were the Gregory. Excuse me? Both Raynare and Rias widened their eyes in surprise at the answer. The holy swords were taken by the fallen angel organization. It's not a matter of mistake. But certainly it would be the fallen angels when it comes to stealing them. For the devils working at the top, holy swords does not give them much interest. Hey, what are you trying to say? Raynare spoke up hastily. Are you calling us? Raynare, calm down. Rias told her warningly before apologizing to Xenovia. My deepest apology. Raynare was a fallen angel before I turned her into my servant, a devil. Both priests nodded their heads in understanding. Anyway, Irina cleared her throat, we know the main culprit who stole the Excaliburs. It's one of the leaders of Gregory, Gabriel. Gabriel, one of the leaders of the fallen angels that survived the previous wars since ancient times. I never expected to hear the name of the one that appears in the Bible. Rias smirked at the name. Issei heard Raynare muttering something under her breath, but from the way she was saying it, it seemed she was expecting that name to come out. We sent priests, exorcists, to this town secretly, but they kept getting killed. Xenovia said seriously, our request, no. Our order is to not to have any devils intrude in the battle between us and the fallen angels for the Excaliburs. In other words, we came here to tell you not to interfere with this incident. Ria's eyes changed after hearing the way Xenovia talked. Such manner of speech. Is it restraint? Are you thinking that we might collaborate with those fallen angels? Perhaps that we might team up with them to do something with Excalibur. You have a fallen angel here as your servant, don't you? Xenovia's eyes turned to Raynare for a second. The headquarters think that it might not be impossible. Ria's gaze became cold, and Issei knew instantly that she was pissed. Just like when she challenged Razor, the higher-ups don't trust devils, and especially fallen angels. We were ordered as if the holy swords are taken away from God's side, then the devils would also be happy, right? The fallen angels would also profit from it. For those reasons it won't be weird for them to form an alliance. That's why we are giving you a warning. If you form an alliance with the fallen angel Gabriel, then we will eliminate you all, even if you're the little sister of the Mao, by our boss. Xenovia said it casually without caring about Ria's glare. If you are fully aware that I am the sister of a Mao, then it means that you have lots of connections with the higher-ups in the church. Then I will say it. We will not form an alliance with the fallen angels. Never, in the name of the Gremory house. I will not do something that would tarnish the name of our Mao. But Xenovia laughed. Phew. Hearing that is good enough. I had to warn you just in case that Gabriel is hiding himself in this town along with the 3 Excaliburs. If something were to happen, I would be the one to be hated by the bunch in the church headquarters. Well, we won't ask for cooperation. If you were to form an alliance with God's side temporarily, then it would affect the balance of the 3 factions, especially if it's the little sister of Amao. After hearing Xenovia's words, Rias softened her expression and took a deep breath. Where is the person the Orthodox Church dispatched? They have that person put on hold for this case. They are planning to protect the last Excalibur if Irina and I fail. So it's just the 2 of you. You are going to retrieve the Excaliburs from the leader of the fallen angel with just the 2 of you? How reckless. Are you trying to die? Rias said it with an amazed voice. But Irina and Xenovia both said it with straight eyes. Yes. I have the same view as Irina, but if it's possible, I don't want to die. But the blue-haired woman also added, with her voice remained unchanged. You came here to Japan prepared to die. The belief in your teaching is extreme like always. Don't talk ill of our beliefs, Rias Gremory. Right, Xenovia? Irina became angry at Ria's words and turned to look at her partner for support. Right. Also, the church decided that it would be better to eliminate all of the Excaliburs rather than letting them get used by the fallen angels. Our minimum objective is to get the Excaliburs away from the fallen angels. To accomplish that, it's okay for us to die. The only way to fight against the Excaliburs are Excaliburs. Is it possible with only the 2 of you? Issei asked them, for the first time. Well, we won't die in vain. Xenovia said fearlessly to his question. You seem confident, Irina. Do you have a secret weapon? Maybe. I will leave it to your imagination. Irina nodded, smiling softly. After that, the 2 of them just stared at each other and the conversation stopped. Irina and Xenovia looked at each other, nodding their heads and stood up. Then we will take our leave now. Let's go, Irina. So you won't drink your tea? I can prepare a snack for you. I don't need it. Xenovia declined Ria's offer right away. I'm sorry. See you. Irina did the same and turned around. However, before any of them could try to leave, they both of them looked in the same direction. It was Asia. When I saw you in Hyodu Issei's house, I thought that maybe it was you. Are you the witch Asia Argento? I never expected to meet you in a place like this. Xenovia said with a calm tone, making Asia's body shake after she was called witch. Issei knew that word was something painful to Asia. His glare hardened, and he looked at Xenovia coldly. Irina seemed like she noticed as well and stared at Asia. Are you the rumored witch? The former holy maiden? You are said to have the power that can also heal devils and fallen angels, right? I heard that you were sent somewhere after getting exiled, but I never thought you became a devil. My, Asia stuttered, as she didn't know how to react to Irina and Xenovia's words. It's okay. I won't tell the higher-ups what I saw here, so rest assured. People who were around the Holy Maiden Asia will also get shocked as well. Asia made a perplexed expression at Irina's words. But to become a devil, the one who was called a Holy Maiden, you fell to the lowest place you could. Do you still believe in our God? Xenovia, there's no way that she, who became a devil, still believes in God. Irina said it with an amazed face. No, I can smell the belief from her. It might be an abstract way of saying it, but I'm sensitive to these things. There are people who betray the teachings and still have guilt within them because they couldn't forget the teachings. I can feel something similar coming from her. Xenovia said it with sharp eyes, and Irina stared at Asia even more with interested eyes. Is that true? Asia-san, you still believe in God even if you have turned into a devil. Asia replied to that question with a sad expression. I just can't put it aside. I believed in it for my whole life. Is that so? Then you should be cut down by us this instant. If it's now, I can cut you in the name of God. Even if you have sinned, our God will forgive you. Xenovia took her sword out from the cloth and pointed it at Asia. However, in an instant, faster than Xenovia could even see it, Issei appeared in front of Asia and stood protectively in front of her. In his hand was his demonic sword, still unsheathed, and he held it high with one hand, pointing at the spot between Xenovia's eyes. Don't touch her, he said coldly, sending a murderous glare at Xenovia. which sent chill down her spine when she saw the amount of killing intent behind it. If you come close to Asia, I will cut you down and send you back to your god in a body bag. Even Issei didn't know what he was saying, and he said those words like they were perfectly normal for him. Do you even have the right to call someone like Asia a witch? Eyes, please calm. Rias tried to calm her knight down, but the moment his eyes, which remained unchanged, turned to her, she suddenly felt a cold chill that was even worse than the feeling she got from Excalibur. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence, the atmosphere so tense that one could cut it with a knife. Two swordsmen and swordswomen pointed their sword at each other's face and throat, with Issei being the one who was ready to kill the woman in front of her, mercilessly. Realizing that he wasn't going to back down, even though he was standing right in front of Excalibur, Xenovia steeled her nerve and glared at Issei. Yes, I have. Right now she is a being at least fit to be called a witch. Don't fuck around. Not even a single person helped her when she needed help. Those who can't understand her kindness are a bunch of idiots. It's wrong that none of them tried to become her friend. Do you think the Holy Maiden needed friends? Issei gritted his teeth at those words. What's important is the charity to others. The Holy Maidens are finished when they seek friendship and love from others. She could have continued to live with the love from God. So Asia Argento didn't have the right to be a Holy Maiden from the beginning. Xenovia said it as if it was an obvious thing. You have no idea how important friendship is, right? Issei asked emotionlessly. So you guys selfishly made her into a holy maiden and then abandoned her because she's different from those who seek her? Issei growled. A dangerous aura appeared around him. None of you know what she went through. You said God loved her? That fucking God didn't do jack shit when Asia was in a dangerous situation. But Xenovia answered calmly, God loved her. If nothing happened, then it means that she didn't believe in him enough, or her belief was fake. She then asked Issei, what are you to Asia? I'm her friend, her family. Issei said it matter of fact. That's why I will help Asia. Just go ahead and try to lay a hand on her. I will make sure your death will come faster than you see the blade of my sword. Xenovia sharpened her eyes at my provocation. Is that a declaration to us, all of those in the church? Something big coming out from a single devil. Gremory, I think you didn't educate him enough? Before Rias could say anything to answer Xenovia, a certain blonde swordsman appeared beside Issei, carrying a sword in his hand. His killing intent was enormous. That's good timing. I will be your opponent, Kiba said, with a smirk. Who are you? I'm your senpai, though I apparently was a failure. That instant, a countless number of demonic swords appeared in the clubroom. Line break. A few minutes after the battle of words, it's time for them to get serious. Issei was standing at the place where they were practicing for the ball tournament with Kiba standing a bit away from him. Irina and Xenovia were standing in front of them, with the very same determination. Enveloping them and their surroundings was a barrier made from red aura. The other members of the Occult Research Club were looking at us from outside the barrier. Then let's start. Irina and Xenovia took their white robe off and were wearing battle outfits, which consists of black, skin-tight, short-sleeved unitard with pauldrons, matching fingerless gloves that extend to their biceps, and thigh-high boots, all of which were adorned with straps. Xenovia took the cloth off her weapon and revealed her Excalibur, while the Excalibur that Irina had also turned into the shape of a katana. Both were ready to begin their battle. After Kiba got involved, Xenovia made a clear suggestion. It might be interesting to test the strength of Rias Gremory's servants. Also, I'm interested in the strength of the so-called senpai. Xenovia accepted Kiba's challenge, and she also added that the battle wouldn't be reported to the church. Apparently, they understood our position a little bit, so they made it so that it wouldn't be a problem if it was not a fight for life. The location was the place they practiced for the ball tournament near the old school building. To avoid unnecessary damage and getting noticed by others, Akeno put up a barrier for them. Eyes, please, listen to me. Rias spoke up to Issei from the other side of the barrier. She remembered Hayato's words for her and the others. She knew it was hard to keep Issei from a situation like that, but she knew she would lose him again if she kept him from involving in battles. You can still back down from this. You have already made your point. There's no reason for you to fight. I made myself clear, but you, Issei said to her with a calm tone, don't try to stop me. He made every word clear to Rias. He felt rage, but also extremely calm, which made him even more dangerous. Rias and the others could see it, and they instantly knew that there was nothing they could do stop him at that moment. Buchu, I don't understand. Even against Excaliburs, why are you so worried? Momo decided to speak up. You said Issei was very strong, so surely he can beat them without any trouble, right? She looked at the others as well, trying to seek an answer. It's more complicated than that, Momo-san. Akeno shook her head and didn't say anything more. So be it then. Rias bit her bottom lip, making up her mind, and said, but please, be cautious of the holy swords. One fight. She would let him have this fight, but I will stop this fight immediately if it gets out of hand. Understood? Yes. Issei nodded his head firmly, tightening his grip in his hand. Irina, it seems you will have to fight that friend of yours. Xenovia whispered to her partner while observing their opponents, keeping a close eyes on Issei. Be careful, he's not normal. Not normal were the right words to describe Issei Hyodu and his abnormally amount of killing intent. Even standing next to the one who would stop at nothing to kill them, his aura was overwhelming. Don't worry, Xenovia. There is nothing that will stop me from purifying him with my blade. Irina said confidently with a wink, we have God is on our side, after all. Kiba, on the other hand, had activated his sacred gear and created several demonic swords around him. He then started laughing, to the point it became really weird. Are you laughing? Yeah, the thing I wanted to defeat and destroy appeared right in front of me. I'm happy. Phew. I had even heard that by being close to a devil and a dragon powers would gather. But for me to encounter it this early. Sword birth, huh? Xenovia asked while looking at the swords around Kiba. The possessor can create any demonic sword they imagine in their head. It's unique among the demonic sword-related sacred gears. I heard that there was a subject that avoided from being disposed by the Holy Sword Project. Is that you? Kiba didn't answer her question. He picked up his sword and got ready to fight, or kill Xenovia from the look of it. Hyodu Issei-kun. The one who was standing in front of Issei, Irina spoke to him, with her eyes shone, when I met the boy that I haven't seen for so long, and he turned into a devil. I was shocked. I heard that there was an accident and you also lost your memories 10 years ago. Did it change your personalities as well? She looked at him with pitiful face, with a single drop of tear falling down her cheek, a pitiful Hyodu Issei-kun. No, I will call you Eyes-kun since I knew you since a long time ago. And what trick has destiny played on us? I went to England because I found out that I can use holy swords, and I thought that I could be a representative of God. Ah, this also must be a trial that God has given me. The land that I haven't been back in for so long. A harsh destiny where my childhood friend has turned into a devil. The way time moves is harsh, but by moving forward, I will turn into someone with the true belief towards God. Now Eyes-kun, I will give judgment to you with this Excalibur. Amen. Even though Irina was shedding tears, she seemed really eager to do it and pointed her sword at him. Are you done now? Issei ignored the pain from Irina's prayer. Good, because I don't need to hear what you have to say anymore. He then took his earphones away and dropped them down to the ground. His sword, while rather strong for a demonic sword, had nothing to compare to the holy power of Excalibur. He also had a feeling that it would shatter immediately if it got hit. But he had a way with that. The knight closed his eyes, took a deep breath with his mouth before opening them, steelly looking at Irina. Here I come, Eyes-kun, Irina cried and rushed in slashing towards him, but Issei simply dodged by moving to the side, raising his sword above his head and struck Irina, aiming for her head. But the chestnut-color-haired priestess saw it and dodged with the flat side of her holy sword, smiling confidentially at Issei. However, before she could react, the knight turned his body around and delivered a kick straight into her midsection, sending them stumbling backward, holding her stomach in pain. What? Irina gasped in shock. Her eyes widened even further when Issei appeared right in front of her, hitting her chest with the tip of his sword, sending a point-blank force through her body too fast. A sword fight between Excalibur and a weak demonic sword was out of question for Issei, so he decided to use his punches and kicks instead. Also, he would avoid sword contact if the situation called for it. Doom! As Issei continued his onslaught, suddenly, the place where he was standing on shook and the ground started rumbling. He turned around and raised his arms to block the dirt from flying into his eyes. His eyes then widened when he saw a massive crater at the place where Xenovia was standing in the middle, with her sword stabbing into the ground. Just like that with a single hit. While shocked, Issei couldn't help but feel amazed at the power of her sword. It would seem that even after promoting himself to knight, Kiba still had little chance against Xenovia. His anger for Excalibur and the priestesses had completely clouded his judgment and made his skill dull and wild. Kiba then raised his hand above his head, created a gigantic sword, which was even higher than his height, and held it with both hands while releasing an ominous aura. Kiba then swung it down with force. The slash reached Xenovia, but she made a sigh as if she was really disappointed. Xenovia raised her sword and slashed Kiba's blade, breaking it easily, sending a large fragment of the broadsword into the air. Xenovia then hit the pommel of the holy sword deep into the pawn's stomach, which sent a shockwave through the field. Kiba fell onto the ground after he vomited blood from his mouth. Kiba was done, but the fight wasn't over. "Don't underestimate me, Issei-kun," Irina cried out and attacked him from behind. She knew that he couldn't hear without his headphones and would use it as her advantage. However, before she could slash him, Issei suddenly rushed forward, accelerating to his godly knight speed in a second. Xenovia widened her eyes when she heard a sonic boom and turned around just in time to see Issei standing right in front of her, picking up Kiba's creations and using them to attack her. Xenovia raised Excalibur Destruction and blocked his attack, shattering his weapons as soon as they made contact with each other. However, Issei showed no sign of stopping and yanking more swords from the ground, continuing his onslaught on Xenovia. Swords after swords broke in his hands, but Issei kept pushing forward, striking faster and faster with each sword Excalibur destroyed. Soon, Xenovia found it hard to keep up with Issei's intense attack, and had to retreat by jumping back. "C'est so cool," Momo said in total amazement. "Issei-kun is so cool." Her eyes could hardly keep up with Issei's speed, but she could tell that he was winning, and see him performing some amazing swordsmanship she had never seen before. "Enough," Xenovia cried out in frustration and slashed her sword vertically, sending a wave of pure, destructive power toward the swords on the ground, destroying them to pieces. Issei took a strong leap into the air to avoid the wave, and shot down to give Xenovia a hard blow to the head with his sword, knocking her down to the ground. "Xenovia," Irina tried to assist her partner, but the moment she was close enough, Issei turned around, holding his sword at his hip. One hand opened and put on the handle. Irina slashed him, but her sword went through him like he wasn't there. The brown-haired young woman widened her eyes when she saw another Issei standing behind the one she just attacked in the same stance. He's fast?" Momo cried out excitedly and turned to Raynare. "Is that an afterimage? Please tell me that's an afterimage." It was the first time she had seen a battle like that in real life, and she couldn't stop herself from getting extremely excited about it. "Yes, that's an afterimage." Raynare nodded her head. Issei used his thumb to push the sword out of its scabbard and grabbed the handle. Issei then pulled his sword out and slashed relentlessly in less than 1/10 of a second before sheathing it back to place. Akeno gasped slightly in surprise when Irina's battle outfit were shredded to small, tiny pieces and fell down to the ground, leaving her completely naked. Momo, meanwhile, choked on her own saliva and looked at Issei with her eyes wide in shock. So he did have a pervert side. How nice. "What the?" Raynare muttered in shock, while Asia didn't know what to say, and Koneko just looked at him blankly. That moves had completely ruined his image in her eyes. "Kaya!" Irina cried out and immediately crouched down, using her hands to cover her body. "Issei-kun no hentai?" He didn't hear it, but he could tell what she was saying. "Eyes!" Rias cried out and slammed her hand against the barrier. "Sorry." He lowered his head to his childhood friend with both hands clasped tightly at his sides, and then turned around to look at his friends. "I'm sorry everyone, but it's the only way to end this fight without me seriously harm her." He told them that through his own language. As Akeno removed the barrier and Xenovia went to cover her friend with a white cloak, Rias walked to Issei. "There are many ways for you to end the fight." She gestured furiously. "Why did you do that?" "You know my problem, Buchu," Issei said and accepted the earphones from Asia, giving her a grateful smile before putting them on. I always have a strong urge to cut down my enemies whenever I have a weapon in my hands. Xenovia and Irina insulted Asia doesn't help me either. He explained, so, when I fight them, I think about the one that I can never hurt, you. Me? Rias widened her eyes in surprise after that and started blushing while smiling wryly. And Akeno-san, Asia, Raynare and everyone, Issei continued, making Rias drop her smile in disappointment. Think about the people you care about the most. Oji-sama told me to do it whenever I got myself in an avoidable fight. It's the only way for me to stop myself from seriously harming them. He turned his head around and looked at the priestesses. They badmouthed Asia, but there was no reason for him to kill them, for real. A beating and humiliation were enough. His grandfather's advice for him was really helpful, but he didn't know if he could do it again the next time. Also, care to explain to me why you strip Irina off her clothes? Rias asked suspiciously. It's pretty effective, but I don't think you did it for no reason. Well, to tell you the truth, I only did that because I don't know where to cut Irina. Issei said, and Rias had an urge to face palm. I don't know much about humans' bodies, so I don't want to accidentally cut an artery or anything fatal, you know. They had Asia there to help if the situation got bad, but he didn't want to shred blood, because it would only fill his bloodlust. I see, Rias nodded her head and made a sigh in relief. I'm proud of you, Eyes. She smiled at him. Thank you, Bushu. The knight smiled gratefully and lowered his head at his master. Ara, Issei-kun. Akeno suddenly appeared at his side, hugging herself to his arm. Unlike our king, I think you deserve more than praise. How about you allow your queen to give you a reward? She asked in a sultry tone, pushing her large breasts into his side. Knowing Akeno and her strange taste, Issei decided to refuse. I think I will pass, Akeno-san. Oh, you're thinking about the kind of reward like our training, right? Akeno giggled. Don't worry, Issei-kun, I'm thinking about something else. She then moved closer and whispered into his ears, something that is going to happen between your legs, of course. Her words made his face go red and annoyed Rias and the other girls to no end. That's enough, Akeno. Rias pushed her queen away before she could do more harm than good. Stop trying to corrupt my eyes. Yufufu, I'm not. Plus, I'm sure that Issei-kun liked the sound of that, aren't you, my knight? Akeno smiled at him seductively, licking her lips in a very sexual way. Akeno-senpai is so scary. Momo shuddered while looking at the elder girl. So much for the Nechiko Yamato one-sama. Raynare said, and Momo nodded her head in agreement. The half-fallen angel then turned her head to look at Issei, who was still deep in thought, and hit in his rib. What are you thinking, Issei-kun? Stop acting like a pervert. I thought you hate pervert. Sorry Momo-chan, Raynare-chan, but what did you say again? He asked her, and the idol giggled softly while Raynare could only sigh in disappointment while shaking her head. After that, Xenovia and Irina left Kyo Academy, with the later promise to judge him for his sins at another time. Kiba also left the field after that, with his head low in defeat. Chapter 18. After the mock fight with the duo Excalibur's wielders from the heaven side of the three great factions from the Bible, with his ultimate defeat, Kiba left the school without any other words, making Issei and the others get even more worry about him. Rias was upset, Akeno and Raynare could only sigh in defeat, and Asia was very worried while Momo didn't know how to react, since she didn't know Kiba that well. Kiba was his friend, his comrade, so Issei was worried about him too. But he believed that he should let the pawn be for the time being. Even when his mind was filled with hatred, Issei knew that Kiba wouldn't try to go after the two exorcists, knowing that he would be defeated as easy as before. Sitting in the bathtub washing his hair, Issei couldn't help but wonder if he could do anything to help the young man. Xenovia and Irina were there to retrieve the holy swords, but they also said that it would be better to eliminate all of them rather than letting the swords get used by the fallen angels. Kiba wanted to destroy them too, so basically they were aiming for the same objective. Plus, the fallen angel who stole the Excaliburs, Gabriel, and his underlings were somewhere in the town. From what he knew about the leaders of three great factions, they were the forces to be reckoned with and shouldn't be underestimated in any way. There was a possibility that Xenovia and Irina would stand no chance against them, and would lose their life while trying in vain. Issei believed that if he could convince the girls to let them help, again because they had the same objective, they would have more chances against Gabriel and his minions. However, Issei couldn't think about a possibility where Rias and Akeno would allow him to do something like that. He also didn't believe that he was strong enough to go head-to-head against a Mao class being like Gabriel, with or without Sugary no Ontachi. Speaking of the most powerful elemental sword, Issei believed maybe it was the time for him to. Issei flinched in surprise because he felt something touch him and abruptly turned his body around to see what, or rather who it was. However, his eyes widened in shock when he saw his mistress Rias Gremory standing in front of him without a single piece of clothes on her voluptuous body. Hien Tilda, Issei saw her moaning something with a rather strange face and a bright blush on her cheeks. It took him less than a second to realize that his right hand was placed firmly on her right breast, and her nipple poked against the middle of his palm. His mind, at that moment, worked with night speed, which allowed Issei to actually feel and admit Rias Gremory's marvelous and wonderful asset, the wildest dream of many perverts at Kuo Academy. His fingers sank into her flesh, which was softer than the softest pillows he could ever find, and his entire hand could barely the front part of it, as each breast was as big as his head. Ah! He made a sound of surprise and forcefully took his hand back, making her breast jiggle in the process. His hands then flew around in the air in a panic, trying to make the correct signs for sorry, I didn't mean to do it and everything along those lines. However, Rias could hardly recognize any of the symbols he was trying to make, but smiled because she knew what he was trying to tell her. It's all right, Eyes, you have every right to do that from now on. Issei blushed brightly when Rias told him that with her hands. He was expecting a teasing smile, but he was surprised when he saw none. It wasn't the first time Rias had tried to enter the bathroom while he was inside, but it was actually the first time she was able to enter while he was still using it. He usually let the girls use it first, or tried to finish it as fast as possible so Rias and the other two could spend their time enjoying it before dinner. However, that day she got really lucky, because Issei was too lost in his own thoughts to acknowledge the time. Asia and Raynare had also left to the local mall to get some groceries for Issei's mother, and wasn't going to return anytime soon. I should leave, Issei spoke up with words and tried to leave, but Rias suddenly grabbed his shoulder and put a hand on his cheek. The crimson-haired young woman then pushed him against the wall of the bathroom and pressed her body against his, keeping him where she wanted. Why did he always get himself in trouble like that? He didn't know. But one thing for sure, a certain part of him was more honest than the so-called noble knight, and got excited pretty quickly when Rias pushed her sexy body against his. Eyes, Rias spoke his hand softly and made his hearing aids appear magically on his ears. Her hands gently caressed his chest, and she pressed her body against his, because she knew that he liked it more than he appeared to be. Buchu, what are you? The knight stuttered, but Rias silenced him by putting a finger on his lips. You know, I haven't thanked you probably for winning my freedom and ending my marriage engagement for me, Eyes, she said softly, tracing his lower lip with the tip of her finger. Ah, you don't have to, Buchu. Yes, I don't have to, but I want to. Rias shook her head slightly and moved her head closer, putting her hands around his neck. Eyes, do you like me? Of course. He nodded his head firmly, saying that without thinking for more than a millisecond. Good. And with that, she sealed his lips with her own. It happened for an instant, and Issei had his eyes widened in shock when he felt Ria's lips against his. Her soft lips and the smell of her crimson hair froze his brain. After about a minute, Rias pulled back, their lips separated, and Issei suddenly felt disappointed and lost, somehow, but he was still too shocked to say or do anything. That was my first kiss. Rias laughed softly as she looked at him. It's something that girls treasure in Japan, right? Issei could only nod his head dumbly at her question while muttering. Why, yeah, the first kiss was really important to girls, so he was very surprised that Rias decided to give it to him. Her servant, are you okay with it? That it was, with me? He asked nervously. You did something that's worth having a kiss with me. It's a reward. Hearing that, Issei lowered his eyes and shook his head. You know it wasn't me who defeated Razor, Buchu. Yes, it's you, Eyes. Rias told him with a firm tone, lifting his head up to look at her. It's all thanks to you that I'm able to decide my own future, and choose whoever I want to be with. You're my knight, Nothing is going to change that. Buchu. Call me Rias, she said, and Issei suddenly realized that their faces were dangerously close to each other. Call me by my name whenever you want. Eyes. I. Don't be so shy. The Gremory heiress smiled, tracing her hand around his chest. Just call me by my name, and I will give you another reward. Her smile became seductive, and Issei did the only thing that was logical at that moment. Rias. Rias harshly pushed him against the wall again, much to his surprise, and crashed her lips against his, giving him the deepest kiss possible, with her tongue forced its way into his mouth and dominated his tongue, making his mind spin and feel weak on the knees. Much like Rias, Issei's control soon broke, and he returned the favor with just as much passion. If their first kiss was soft and gentle, then the second one was hot and passionate, with their tongue wrestle for domination. Eyes. Rias suddenly pulled back to gasp for breath while looking at him with wide eyes, but not for long, because she shot forward and hungrily kissed him again. She could barely think straight. All she could feel at the moment was the love and lust for the young man she was kissing. Her mouth ravished his, and yet she wanted more of him, and wasn't disappointed when Issei gave it to her, hard. Soon, it's her turn to get pinned against the wall and ravished orally, but she happily welcomed it. For someone who could get just as, or even more sadistic than her queen herself, a rough treatment was something she was expecting from her knight. He kissed her hard, shoved his tongue into her mouth and completely dominated hers, grabbed her breast and ass and squeezed them hard. That went on for another 3 minutes before the need for air forced them to separate again, and Rias fell down to her knees the moment Issei released her, panting hard. The first kiss was just like what she imagined, soft and tender, but the second one was something that well suited their devilish nature. Looking at him, Rias saw that he was pretty much in the same situation as she was, and had to support his body with his hands on the wall, trying to catch his breath and keeping up with what just happened. Suddenly realized her position underneath him, Rias trailed her eyes down and widened her eyes in surprise when her vision got filled with his manhood, which was only a couple of inches from her face. Of course, it was not the first time she saw it, but his size had always impressed her, especially when it's hard. It must be something to do with the fact that he was descendant of the people who was blessed by Shinto gods. This is it. Rias mentally steeled her nerves and gathered her courage. This is my chance. There were too many girls that had feeling for him to the point it became very troublesome for her. Asia and Raynare had feeling for him for sure. Akeno, at first, just wanted to mess with him, but recently she had seen something different in her queen's eyes whenever she looked at her knight. Momo, on the other hand, showed it very clearly that she had some attractions to Issei. Eyes is mine. She reached her hand out and cupped his balls, feeling their weight with her palm before moving her head forward and brought out her tongue to lick his hard cock. She did it. Issei had to bite the inside of his mouth to keep himself from moaning after taking that surprise attack from his mistress. His head shot back when she did it again, but slower and longer, going all the way from the base to the tip of his manhood. Rias. You taste so good, Eyes. Rias spoke, licking her lips at the thought of having more of it. She moved her hand to his cock and gently stroked it, smiling when she saw it throbbing in her hand. Let me please you, Eyes. Rias Bochu, we can't. But she effectively shut his mouth by claiming her lips around the head of his cock, taking it into her mouth. She smiled mentally when Issei made a pleasurable grunt, which encouraged her to do more. With that in mind, she popped it out of her mouth and let saliva rain all over his cock, giving it a nice shine. As she continued to stroke the upper half of his cock, she lowered her head and opened her mouth wide to fill it with one of his balls. Issei moaned in pleasure as Rias sucked on his balls, alternating attention from one to the other. His cock rested on her cheek, dripped pre-cum down her head and some on her face. As she paused to admire her amazing work, she felt Issei's hand on her head, pushing her towards his pole, and she happily leaned towards him, tasting the tip as it pushed into her mouth. She could suck his cock all day, swirling her tongue around his head, licking up the pre-cum spilling from his tip. He tasted even better with his cum. Rias started bobbing her head, and it took her a couple of minutes to have the tip of his cock hit the back of her throat, but instead of stopping there, she kept pushing her head forward, plunging the whole thing into her mouth and down her throat. Being a virgin, it was too much for Issei to handle. His cry of pleasure was all the warning Rias got before her knight let loose. Her eyes flew wide open as the already thick shaft stretching her throat expanded further, causing her to gag as Issei started hosing her throat down with his thick cum. For nearly 3 minutes, she was forced to gulp down the thick creamy liquid constantly erupted from his cock. His sperm tasted weird and a bit salty, but she loved it. After his cock had stopped twitching, Rias slowly slid his softing erection out her mouth, gently sucking the entire way till she released him from her mouth with a loud pop. Issei fell to the ground, and Rias quickly crawled onto his hip, straddling his hips and pressed her lips against his for their third kiss. It went on naturally, but she was slightly disappointed that he didn't return and she was the one who did all the kissing work. "Did I make you feel good, eyes?" she asked after pulling back. The knight nodded his head dumbly. "Well then, do you want me to give you more?" She put a finger on her lip while giving him a seductive smile. "Or you want to use me yourself?" And who was he to deny such offer from his master, especially when he also had a lot of pent-up frustration lately. 2 hours later. "Ara, you look so happy today, Rias-chan," Midori Haidu commented while the family was sitting around the dining table to enjoy dinner with each other. "Did something happen?" she asked, looking at the crimson-haired girl, who was eating her foods while giggling to herself. "Yes, Kasama." She nodded her head, smiling brightly. "Yufufu, I'm glad." She then glanced at Issei, who was sitting next to Rias. With her motherly eyes, she could see that something had happened to her son as well, and it was as clear as daylight to her that he was trying to act like normal. Ding dong. "Huh? I wonder who it is," Issei's father wondered out loud and was about to stand up. But Rias beat him to it after putting her empty bowl down. "Let me answer the door to Sama," she said. "I'm done anyway." The parents widened their eyes in surprise, while Raynare and Asia just looked at her curiously. "She only had one bowl, didn't she?" Midori asked after Rias had disappeared and picked up Ria's bowl. "Well, you know girls these days and their diet to keep their figure." Rias walked to the door of Haidu residence and opened it, expecting a friend of her knight's parents, or even his grandfather who usually came to visit them. However, even before the door was fully opened, Rias widened her eyes in surprise when she saw someone she was very familiar with. "Good evening, Aju-sama." It was Grayfia Lucifuge, who greeted her with a bow. "Now, let's make the greeting short. May I come into the house then, Aju-sama?" "Huh? Yes, of course." Rias nodded her head, still feeling surprised by the strongest queen's sudden arrival. "What are you doing here, Grayfia? Did Oniai-sama tell you to come here?" She gave her brother a report about the 2 Excalibur's wielders that afternoon, but didn't think he would send someone like his queen all the way to the human world. "Not just him, Aju-sama." Grayfia shook her head while entering the house, "but the entire council, including your father, sent me here to ensure the situation and your safety." What? "I will explain everything, Aju-sama." After Grayfia had greeted Issei's parents, who was surprised to see such a beautiful woman like her, they moved into Issei's room and put on a silence spell to prevent their conversation from being heard by them. "I'm so glad that you've fully recovered, Grayfia-san," Issei said to the silver-haired queen from his position with a smile. He was relieved to see Grayfia in such a good shape. "Like I said before, Issei-san, there's no need for you to be so worried about. I'm a lot tougher than I look." Grayfia replied with a small smile, one of the rare smiles they could see from the usual stern queen. "It's all thanks to the phoenix tears that saved my life and you, Asia-san. I was able to heal so quickly." She turned to the blonde-haired girl, who became nervous but smiled nonetheless. Asia took a large part in healing Grayfia a couple of days after she woke up. Without her and her sacred gear, Twilight healing, it would take her a lot more time to get back on her feet. I'm glad that I can help." Grayfia lowered her head a little, to show her gratitude to Asia once again. "Grayfia, did my brother and the higher-ups really sent you here to keep eyes on everything?" Rias asked, crossing her arms on her chest. "I'm not a little girl who need to be taken care of like when I was small, you know." "By all means, Aju-sama, Sirzechs-sama and Lord Gremory both agreed that you're more than capable of taking of yourself," Grayfia said, "but the current situation about Excaliburs is no longer something they can just sit by and see how it is going to turn out, especially when it is happening in this town, where 2 clan heiresses were residing." The silver-haired queen explained, Serafall-sama has also sent one of her servants to watch over her sister. We're here to make sure nothing is going to happen, and to take care of things in the situation where you two get involved more than you should. Look, we've already made an agreement. They don't try to do anything to my servants or harm the innocent peoples in my territory and just do their job. I won't poke my nose into their business. Rias shook her head in displeasure. Will you, Aju-sama? Grayfia asked. The higher-ups all agreed that you're the one who need to be watched over the most. You have too many connections with the current situation. Kiba Yudo was a victim of the Holy Sword Project and has a deep hatred to the Holy Swords, especially Excalibur. One of the two exorcists, Irina Shidou, is Issei-san's childhood friend. Are you really saying that you won't get involved, even in the situation where your servants try to? Yeah, but it's not like they will, won't they? She turned her head around and looked at Issei, who gave her a shrug before nodding his head, but inside he felt like Grayfia could read his thought. It was exactly what he thought about before Rias entered the bathroom and interrupted him. Meanwhile, Raynare and Asia did the same, following his example. I know you don't like this Aju-sama, but I still have doubts. The Crimson Heiress pouted. Even though the exorcists are bringing Excaliburs with them, they're not our main concern. Gabriel is the bigger problem. We don't have much information about him, or why he chose this town, where two high-class devils are residing, of all the uncountable towns in the world, to be his hiding place. I faced him in the Great War a couple of times, Aju-sama. He's not like Azazel or the other leaders of Gregory. He enjoys war. You can ask Raynare-san over there. I'm sure that she knows about him better than anyone. She's right, Buchu, Raynare said, looking away. Gabriel-sama strongly believes that the fallen angels are the strongest race and strives to prove it. But by fighting and any hostile ways you can think about. He only wants the best for us fallen angels, but not many of us choose to follow his ideals. He has always wanted to start another great war, but faced strong objection from Azazel-sama, who he has a strong hatred towards. She shrugged. It's not that hard for him to do something like that. All he has to do is hurt you, or Sona Citri-sama, with a holy weapon in order to get heaven in the picture as well. Grayfia nodded her head. I'm here to prepare for the worst. Gabriel is extremely powerful. He's not someone you or your servants have the powers to fight against, at least for the time being. Plus, Momo Momonozo, the current secretary, is living in this town. We can't risk losing her to anyone. So, is there anything I should know about? Rias asked. Grayfia had a point. With someone like her around, there was nothing she needed to worry about, especially while she was trying to prevent Issei from getting into as many battles as possible, even after he had figured it out a way to control his bloodlust. The strongest queen wasn't just a title, after all. I will start living here from tomorrow. Excuse me, what? Rias asked in disbelief. Issei had his eyes widen in surprise, and so did Asia and Raynare. I'm pretty sure that there's at least one spare room for guests, right? Grayfia asked Issei with a small smile, and he could only nod his head. Issei-san's house is not very far from downtown. It's a highly strategic location. But, I will take care of Issei-san's parents' memories, so there's nothing you should worry about, Aju-sama. Grayfia continued, I hope you understand, Aju-sama, Issei-san, but it's for your safety. Sigh, all right then. Rias sighed and looked at Issei. Do you have anything to say, Eyes? This is your house, after all. I'm a maid, Issei-san. Grayfia said, I'm very responsible and can help your parents the housework if you want me to. Well, he looked away for a second before saying, Grayfia-san can stay. I'm grateful. Grayfia lowered her head. Can you three leave me and Grayfia alone? I would like to have a few words in private with her. Rias told her servants, who quickly left the room. I can see the difference in the way you two are looking at each other. Grayfia said after Issei had closed the door, as expected from you, Aju-sama. Ria's cheeks reddened as she remembered what happened in the bathroom. Lord and Lady Gremory will be very happy when they learn about it. Hold on a second. You can't tell them, yet. Rias crossed her arms together in an X. I don't know how he felt about me after we did it in the bathroom. Ada. Grayfia gasped slightly in surprise before smiling teasingly. Youngsters these days are so bold. It's not like that, Rias quickly defended herself. We're not at that point yet. So I assume that you're tired of waiting and made your move, something that shocked him and made him feel just as comfortable as you are now. Why, yeah. Rias wasn't surprised when Grayfia could tell it all. I mean, like you said, I'm tired of waiting. I know that I have to do something, or he'll never understand my growing feeling for him. I wanted to take it slow, Grayfia, but I couldn't do it anymore while the others are doing their best to show their attraction to eyes. She then asked, am I doing the right thing, Grayfia? I don't want to push him away, or make him hate me or see me differently in the way I don't want him to. Well, Aju-sama, I'm not exactly the kind of people that can give you a great advice, since I'm not very successful in this kind of matter. Grayfia chuckled softly. He's your servant, and more importantly, he's your knight. He will feel responsible for your well-being, Aju-sama. That's the reason why he will never hate you. I see. But I do believe that you should give him some time to think about it. However, you don't have to hold it back when you want to show your feelings for him. Please don't forget that you're a devil. Issei-san is no longer human, and we don't usually follow humans' laws. Well, I will make sure to remember that. She said before looking at the clock. Ara, look at the time. I think I should show you your room so you can. Aju-sama, there's also something I need to tell you. Grayfia suddenly straightened herself up and said to Rias seriously, making the crimson-haired girl widen her eyes at the tone Grayfia was using. Cockabeel, the exorcists and Excaliburs, they are not the main reason why I'm here. She paused for a couple of seconds before saying, it's Issei-san. Line break. The next morning, Issei decided to leave for school early without waiting for Rias or the other two. He barely paid any attention to his surroundings and was nearly hit by cars twice, something that was extremely unusual for an extremely careful boy. He wasn't himself that day, and he was acting like an idiot. Even Issei had to admit that. Rias and him, they made out, before she did something he would never forget. To put it bluntly, she sucked his cock, not once or twice, but thrice last night in the bathroom. That kind of reward was too much, even for a devil, someone who had extraordinary affections for her servants. It was simply too much. It was pretty fuzzy, but he could still remember the way she looked at him when he lost it, grabbed her beautiful hair and took charge. It's more or less the same as the way Akeno looked at him when she confessed her feeling. But that was while she didn't have a man's cock shoved down her throat. He had been trying to avoid her since last night. It was not his right to do so. Yes, but how could he not after he treated his master like he was the master and Rias was his to use and to do whatever he want? And Akeno, he felt like he had betrayed her and her feelings for him. But what about Rias? Did she have a special feeling for him too? Deep in thought, Issei didn't see the person who approached him from behind until she decided to take a jump and wrap her arms around his neck. Good morning, handsome. Issei turned his head around and saw the familiar pink hair of Momo Momonozo, who winked while waving her hand at him. Ah, yes, God moaning. He greeted her. What are those signs? Issei mentally slapped himself when Momo shook her head and tried to copy the incorrect signs he just made with her hands. I mean, good morning, Momo-chan. He quickly corrected himself. Ah yes, and good morning to you too, Issei-kun. The female securite said cheerily while her hand was dancing the air. She wanted to ask where the girls who lived with him were, but she couldn't do it because her knowledge of sign language was limited at simple greetings. The two of them headed to school together, but was stopped when they saw two very familiar girls wearing white robes, praying on the road, with a painting of a saint that was drawn really badly next to them. It seemed he was lucky today. Chapter 19 inches. Delicious. Japanese cuisine is delicious. Yes, this is it. This is the taste of the food of my homeland. Irina and Xenovia started filling their stomachs with the foods they ordered at the family restaurant Issei and Momo brought them to. When they saw them earlier, they looked at the two of them with hungry and begging eyes. After some discussions, Issei and Momo had decided to help those before they could make a bigger scene and look more pathetic than they already were. Momo had no problem skipping school, as she had already done that multi-times before. When she asked Issei if he had any problem, he simply told her that he got a few reasons to do so and changed the topic as soon as possible. When Issei asked them if they wanted to come to a local restaurant to get some foods, they said okay straight away and followed the two of them like lost puppies. We sold our souls to the devils. This is also to accomplish our mission. But of course, their pride as exorcists and God's followers didn't allow them to accept his offer that easily. But in the end they had no choice and couldn't do anything than convincing themselves that it's all for the sake of the greater good. Phew. Now I'm calm. It's the end of the world to get helped by a devil. That was what Xenovia said after she put her dish down and used a tissue to clean her lips. TCH, we're treating them for a meal, and yet they cannot stop rambling about this devil that Momo said and leaned back against her chair, crossing her arms underneath her chest and her leg over the other. Fiwe, thank you for the meal. Ah, God, please give charity to these devils, Irina said while holding onto her cross. At that moment, Issei got an insane headache. Because he was deaf, he couldn't hear Asia praying for God, which she did randomly out of habit, so he was able to avoid headaches. With the earphones on, he could hear again, and it hurt just as much as when a devil heard a prayer to the Jesus. Ah, I'm sorry. I did it without thinking. Irina smiled with a cute face. Please be careful next time, Irina-san. Momo then pointed out, and for your information, it's devil, not devils. I'm 100% human, thank you very much. Irina asked in surprise while Xenovia widened her eyes slightly. Then why did you stay with a bunch of devils and follow him around? Because, Momo suddenly leaned to the side and wrapped her arms around Issei's arm. I sold my soul to the devil. He has my soul, so I have to become his servant. The exorcist's mount dropped in shock and their eyes widened in horror. Please don't joke like that, Momo-chan. Issei chuckled forcefully. She's my client. I occasionally help her with her homework and housework, stuffs like that. The Excalibur's wielders seemed to calm down a little, but they were still looking at Momo like she was a sinner. There's also no reason for Issei to tell them about Momo being Sekiryuite just yet. Xenovia drank a cup of water and took a deep breath. She then asked, So, why did you come to us? Xenovia looked at him specifically. I can see that in your eyes, Issei Hyodu. You want to say something, or do business with us, don't you? You too came to this country to retrieve the Excaliburs, right? Issei asked, deciding that he should get straight to the point. That's right. We already told you that before, didn't we? Xenovia nodded her head. I want to help you destroy the Excaliburs. All of them, even Momo, who had let go of his arm, looked surprised at what he just said. Irina and Xenovia turned their head to look at each other, their eyes still wide in surprise. At the moment when he began to get worried that they might not accept his offer, Xenovia opened her mouth to speak. Yeah, maybe it's okay leaving one sword to you, if you can destroy it, that is. But make sure that your identities aren't revealed. We also don't want our high-ups and enemies to think that we are connected to you guys. Hey Xenovia, are you sure? Even if it's Kun, he's still a devil, you know? Irina raised an objection. Irina, to tell you the truth, it would really be tough to retrieve the 3 Excaliburs and to battle Cockabeel with only the 2 of us. I know that, but the minimum objectives we have to achieve are destroying the 3 Excaliburs or take them back. If our Excaliburs are going to be stolen as well, then we should break them before it happens. Even if we use the last resort, there's only a 30% chance that we will succeed in our mission and return home safely. Even so, we thought that the success rate was high enough to come to this country prepared to put our life on the line. Yeah, the high-ups also told us to continue with our mission as well and dispatched us to this country. It's almost self-sacrifice. And isn't that what we, the followers, desire for? Irina asked, tilting her head to the side. I changed my mind. My beliefs are flexible, so I can act in the best way. The blue-haired swordswoman shook her head. I have been thinking about it for a long time, but your faith is a bit weird. I won't deny it, but I think that it's our duty to accomplish our mission and return safely. I'm going to live and continue fighting for God. Am I wrong? You are not wrong, but... just hold on a second there. Just when Issei decided to interrupt their non-stop argument, Momo beat him to it by raising her voice. I don't know what you're talking about, but it seems that you two don't want to accept Issei-kun's help is because he's a devil. Xenovia shrugged and looked at Irina, who was highly against the idea. Tell you what, if you have any problem with that, how about you ask for my help? She pointed at herself, making the two exorcists widen their eyes in surprise. I'm Sekiryuyute, the current holder of boosted gear. And instantly, Xenovia and Irina dropped their jaw and widened their eyes in shock. Why, you must be joking, Irina gasped. Momo-chan, what are you thinking? Issei turned to the pink-haired TV show heroine to him and asked in a low tone, I mean, not that I don't appreciate you helping me and convincing them, but you don't know how to fight, yet. It could be really dangerous. Relax, Issei-kun. Momo smiled smugly. I'm helping you here. You must know to improvise in situation like this. She then turned back to the other two, still holding a smile on her face, but not before nudging his side gently. Plus, you can't actually believe that I'm going to sit still and wait for Rias Buchu to come train me, can you? Issei turned to look at her, but she only gave him a mischievous wink. That's great, Xenovia said joyfully. We don't need to ask for help from the devils. Instead we ask for help from a dragon. The high-ups didn't tell us not to borrow the strength of a dragon. I never thought that I would meet Sekiryuyute in a distant country like this. If it's like the legend says, then you can increase your power to that of a god, correct? If you gain a power to that of a god, then you can break the Excaliburs without breaking a sweat. I also think that it was God's doing that we had this meeting. See, certainly they didn't tell us not to borrow the power of a dragon, but you are just saying nonsense. Your belief is certainly weird. Weird is fine with me. Irina became silent at Xenovia's words, but her expression showed that she was okay with the idea for the time being. Okay then. Momo smiled, the negotiation is a success. I will lend you guys my dragon's power, and Issei-kun here will provide us some high power backup as well. Ara, I feel like a real Kamen Rider now. What should I call myself? She asked herself while giggling gleefully. The others just looked at her like she had become insane, until Issei decided to clear his throat. Then can I call my friend for this cooperation, then? Line break. I understand the situation. Kiba put his mouth on the cup of coffee after he made a sigh. Momo called Kiba with her cell phone and informed him about the situation, as well as the exorcists. He came without any complaint. To tell the truth, I feel unsatisfied when the wielders of the Excaliburs are giving me the permission to destroy it. That's a rough way to speak. If you were a stray devil, I would have cut you down without any time to spare. Kiba and Xenovia started glaring at each other. So you do hold a grudge regarding the Holy Sword project, against the Church and the Excaliburs? Kiba sharpened his eyes at Irina's words. Obviously, he replied with a low and cold voice. But Kiba-kun, thanks to that project, the research on Holy Sword users showed results. That's why it created people like Xenovia and I who can synchronize with the Holy Swords. Do you think it's a forgiving act to kill all the test subjects because the project was thought to be a failure? Kiba looked at Irina with eyes filled with hatred. It was an inhuman act for those who believed in God, and even Irina didn't know how to respond to that question. Then Xenovia spoke. That incident also became one of the worst cases among us, and people felt disgusted about it. The person in charge of that project at that time was said to have a problem with his belief, so he was charged with heresy. Now he's one of those people on the fallen angel's side. On the fallen angel's side? What's the name of that person? Kiba took interest and asked Xenovia. Balba Galilei. He is the man who is called the Genocide Archbishop. If I go after fallen angels, then I can reach him for sure. Kiba nodded his head and showed great determination. Then it looks like I have to share information as well. The other day I was attacked by a person who had the Excalibur. At that time, he killed a priest. The one who was killed is probably from your organization. Everyone became surprised. What? Then why didn't you tell us about that sooner? Issei asked, raising an eyebrow. Well, excuse me if I wasn't myself then, Issei-kun. Anyway, who is it? The name of that person is Fried Zelsen. Does this name sound familiar? TCH, I should have known it was that shitty priest, Issei said in disgust. He still remembered very clearly their first encounter, and how he ran away like a coward. You know him? Momo asked curiously. Enough to hate that bastard. Issei nodded, cursing under his breath. Xenovia and Irina, meanwhile, both made sharp eyes at Kiba's words. I see. So it's him. Fried Zelzen, former exorcist of the Vatican. He is the genius who became an exorcist at the age of 13. He had lots of big achievements because he kept on eliminating devils and mystical beasts. Irina explained, but he overdid it. He even killed his allies. Fried never had any beliefs towards our god from the start. The only thing he had was fighting instinct and killing intent towards monsters, and an abnormal obsession for battles. It was a matter of time that he'd be charged for heresy. Is that so? Fried used the Excalibur he stole to kill our fellow followers? Xenovia said it with hatred, for us to pay the price because the disposal group couldn't take care of him that time. She then took out a pen and wrote on a memo pad, giving them her contact details. Anyways, let's move on to the cooperation strategy. If something happens, call this number, Securite Momo Momonozo. She handed Momo the contact details before looking at Issei. Then that's it then. I'll repay you for the meal another time, Hyodu Issei-kun. She got up after saying that. Thanks for the meal, Ise-kun. Treat me again next time as well. Even if you are a devil, God will allow it if it's Ise-kun who treats me to a meal. It's okay if it's food. Irina thanked Issei while giving him a wink. Everything somehow managed to go smoothly, which Issei had nothing to complain about. He first thought it was a reckless plan, but it worked fine and better than he thought. That was quite a bold move for him, a nameless and low-class devil, especially after Rias told Grayfia her servants would never do such thing without her permission. It could have been the trigger for the war between the devils and people from God's side. Ise-kun? Why did you do this? Kiba asked him quietly, wondering why Issei was helping him out with his revenge. Well, we are comrades, aren't we? We are both servants of Rias Gremory and belong to the same group. You helped me out before, Issei said, putting his hands into his pocket. It's not like I'm trying to repay you, but I thought I would give you a hand this time. If I act by myself, then I would cause trouble for Buchu. That's also the reason, right? Yep. The knight shrugged. You caused enough troubles for her already. Buchu would get sad if you were to go around in a rampage. Well, the fact that I made this plan by myself will cause trouble to her as well. But it's better than you becoming an exile, right? Kiba didn't look satisfied, but he didn't say anything more. On the way home, Kiba started telling them about his tragic past. The project that the Catholic Church planned secretly. Project Holy Sword was the test to make lots of people who can use holy swords was taking place in a certain institute. There were boys and girls who had talents at using swords and possessors of sacred gear. Day after day, they were going through inhuman experiments. They weren't treated as humans and their lives were ignored, but they all had a dream to live on. They were forced to believe that they were loved by God, and they were just waiting for that day to come. Every single one of the subjects believed that they would become special beings and believed that they could become people who could wield the holy weapon. But the result was disposal. Kiba and his comrades couldn't use the holy swords. Everyone died. They were killed. He said quietly, killed by those who serve God. No one saved us, just because we couldn't use the holy swords. Other boys and girls were put under poisonous gas while still alive. They put poisonous gas on us while saying amen. We vomited blood and suffered on the floor. Even so, we were seeking help from God. Kiba told Issei and Momo his story, and they listened to him in silence. Kiba somehow managed to escape from the laboratory, but the poisonous gas had already infected him. Apart from certain people, the test subjects who had lower abilities than average were all disposed of because they weren't needed. Kiba, who managed to escape and met Rias in that faithful night, was saved by her as she turned him into her servant, telling him to live on for her. I want to accomplish my comrades' regrets. No, I don't want to make their deaths be in vain. I need to keep on living in their place, and I have to prove that I am stronger than Excalibur. A tear fell from the corner of Momo's eyes as she listened to his story, while Issei remained silent for the entire time. He didn't know what to say. Asia had a tragic past, but Kiba's was simply horrible. He couldn't really blame his comrade for his hatred toward the people of the church. If he was put in the same shoe as Kiba, he would probably stop at nothing to destroy those who were responsible. He was more determined in helping him more than ever. Line break. Several hours after the negotiation with the exorcists, Issei returned home at 7 o'clock in the evening. Taking off his shoes, Issei was about to enter the house when he suddenly saw a certain silver-haired maid standing there, in front of him with both hands put together in front of her. The knight reached his hand into his pocket and put on his earphones. "Welcome back, Issei-san." Grayfia waited patiently for him to activate his hearing aids to greet him. "Can I have your bag, please?" "Huh, yeah, sure." He wasn't used to having a maid at all, so saying that to her and giving his backpack to her was the only thing he could do. "Aju-sama is waiting for you in your room, Issei-san. She was very worried and afraid that something might happen to you," she informed him, making him freeze right on the spot. "I heard that you were not at school today. Please don't do that again. There's an extremely powerful enemy in this town. It's not safe for you to wander around all by yourself." "Ah, you know Momo-chan, the current secretary?" Issei asked, scratching the back of his head. "She asked me to train her this morning. It was in a rush, so I couldn't inform Buchu and the others." It was an excuse Momo came up with, just in case anyone wanted to ask about their absence that day. Issei didn't know if it could fool his Rias, his friends, or even Grayfia or not, but it was better than nothing. "I see," Grayfia nodded with a small smile. "I'm glad to know that you didn't decide to do anything stupid, or try to handle the current situation yourself." Issei managed to keep a poker face, but he got to admit Grayfia was even scarier than his master, something he should have expected no less from the strongest queen. "I will inform Raynare-san and Asia-san. You should go to your room now, Issei-san." He really didn't need Grayfia to tell him to do that, because he had already made up his mind on the way home. "I will. Thank you, Grayfia." He smiled to the silver-haired queen before climbing the stair that led to the second floor, where his room was. Issei knocked first, even though it was his room, and he got every right to enter it with or without permission from the others. He knocked 3 times. "Come in, please." He heard Ria's voice and grabbed the doorknob, twisted it and pushed the door open, then walked in. It was rather dark inside, so he turned the light on. Rias was sitting at his table, facing away from him, but he could see the way her arms were moving and could tell that she was wiping her eyes, or rather, she was wiping the tears away. He made her cry. "Buchu. Welcome back, eyes." She greeted him without turning around. "How was your day?" she asked. Good, I suppose. If there was anything better than that he could come up, he would probably say it without hesitation. "Where have you been? Why were you not at school?" she continued to ask him. Momo-chan asked me to train her so. Did you know I was worried?" "I'm sorry," was all he could say. "Sorry." At that moment, Rias snapped and exploded right into his face. She stood up from her seat, turned around to face him, and approached him before slamming her fist into his chest. "Do you have any idea who is in this town, keeping weapons that can kill you almost instantly? I was so worried that you might try to do something stupid to blow up some steam or something like that after what happened." She hit his chest several more times before saying, in a lower tone, "You ignored me and tried to avoid me all night. I thought I freaked you out and got rejected, and you don't want me. I didn't know what to do. Did you see how happy I was after that?" Rias continued on, ignoring his words. "After all that time seeing you with the others, I finally gathered enough courage to give it my all. And yet you acted like I did something really bad. But you surprised me and... But you know what I did? It's bad, and I shouldn't have done that, and... Buchu. I shouldn't walk in while you're taking a bath, or shouldn't try to sleep with you naked, or get so addicted to." "Rias, listen to me." The Crimson Heiress flinched in shock when Issei suddenly grabbed her shoulders and cried out loudly. "What was I supposed to do? You're my master, and you suddenly came and said you wanted to reward me for earning you your freedom back. I would be blind if I couldn't see past your excuse and got the bigger picture. Let's be honest here, you're in love with me, aren't you?" Rias widened her eyes in shock. "I didn't know what to say to you, or do after that. You want to know why? It's because of Akeno-san." What? Rias felt a pain in her chest after she heard that. "She's in love with me too. 2 of the most beautiful girls I have ever met are both in love with me. At first, I thought she just wanted to mess with me, but she confessed her feeling to me." Issei paused a second before saying, "The truth is, I have always liked you ever since I entered high school, but I have never put up the courage to say it to you, even after I became your servant." Eyes. You're my master, a high-class devil while I was just a low-class, handicapped servant. I'm your knight, but I'm still a servant no less. I thought you wouldn't return my feeling when I decided to say it to you, so I decided to keep it for myself and watch over you from behind. He then looked at Rias straight in the eyes, after Akeno-san confessed her feeling for me. I thought it might actually work for the two of us, since we're not that different from each other. I grew to like her a lot, and wanted to take my chance with her. I wanted to ask her out to see where it would go, and I had the feeling that she knew what I was about to ask, but you came and stopped me from doing so. He then lowered his head. I felt like I had betrayed her after what happened between the two of us. Eyes. Is it wrong to like two girls at the same time? Issei asked softly. I like you, Rias, but my feeling for Akeno-san has become just as strong. I don't know what to do anymore. It's all right, Eyes. Rias put her hands on his cheeks and lifted his head up so he could look at her. I'm so happy that you have the same feeling for me, that you like me too. I won't mind if you want to date Akeno, as long as you love me, it's all right. Issei widened his eyes in shock. But you're devil, Eyes. She said, if you're okay with it, it's all right for you to have multi-lovers. Rias. It doesn't matter to me how many women you're in love with. I won't care as long as you love me, as your woman. She then smiled. Also, you don't have to worry too much about our status. I don't care if you're a low-class or a mid-class devil. My feeling for you will always remain unchanged. Plus, if you feel you need to be my equal to have the right to love me, you can always raise your rank to high-class devil, remember? Why, yeah. Akeno, she's my best friend. I want her to feel happy, and it seems she has found a reliable stop from you, Eyes. I want you to take good care of her, Eyes. She has just as much troubles as anyone. If it's you, I'm sure she will finally find happiness. I will, Rias. Not just Akeno, but any girls who confess their love to you. You will accept them, Eyes. Issei said firmly, us female are usually attracted to male who are both strong and charming, like you, so I have the feeling that your harem isn't going to stop at the number of 2. Promise me that you won't reject them, and acted the way you were yesterday. Issei closed his eyes and nodded his head quietly. He was such a fool. We will finish this conversation later, Eyes. Rias moved her head closer and kissed him softly. I love you. What did he do to earn such passion from his wonderful master and her queen? What good did they see from him? Chapter 20 inches. Grayfia-san, can I talk to you for a second? It was a few days after Grayfia started helping Momo with her training, and to say she was a real slave driver was a huge understatement. Currently, she was standing on the sideline of Kuo Academy's schoolyard, keeping a close eye on Momo as she was desperately trying to finish her 6th lap around the school, while pulling a truck wheel behind her with a rope tied to her body. Sirzechs Lucifer, the current leader of the underworld and also his mistress brother, had stated very clear that Momo needed to get stronger to prepare for the worst. It's not just because her rivalry with Hakuryu, who she was destined to fight in the near future, but also because of the threats around Kuo at the moment. Momo needed to know how to protect herself, and her power as Sekirute would be of great help to Rias and the others in the worst scenario where they would have to fight Gabriel and his underlings. So, it was decided by the higher-ups and all 4 Mao that Grayfia, while she was staying at the human world to keep an eye on things and protect Rias and Sona until further notice, would help Momo with her training, which had been planned by Rias from the beginning. I'm so tired, Momo groaned breathlessly as she tried to keep herself on her feet. The past few days she had learnt how scary the strongest queen of the underworld could become, and why the majority of the devil faction, which included Sirzechs Lucifer himself, was afraid of said woman. Please wait a few seconds, Eyes-san. Grayfia called as she looked at the stopwatch in her hand. Keep it up, Momo-san. You're beating your best record. You said it like it's a big achievement. How's she doing? Issei asked, looking at his regular client. She always complained about her intense training, but he could see that she took them very seriously. He also heard that she'd been training with boosted gear on her own at her apartment, which was more than enough for him to know her determination to get stronger. She's doing fine. Grayfia said with a nod of her head. Usually, a normal young woman would collapse as soon as she finished her 5th lap in that kind of condition. But this is Momo-san's 7th lap, and since she still has the strength to complain, I'm sure that she can finish 3 more laps around school before reaching her limit. Please don't push her too hard. Issei said concernedly. She's human, after all. Don't worry, Aiz-san, she'll be fine. Her predecessors, the previous Sekyuute, had a rough start just like her, because they too were human. However, each and every single one of them grew to be many of the most powerful figures in the world. Some even had the powers to rival even the dragon inside them. Grayfia said with a smile before turning her head to look at Issei. So, Aiz-san, what do you want to talk about? I want to ask you a favor, Grayfia-san. Issei said as he looked at the sky. It's something I've been thinking lately ever since you've come here to make sure nothing bad is going to happen to Buchu and everyone. What is it, Issei-san? Grayfia looked at the handicapped boy strangely for a moment before asking. The tone he was using meant that he was very serious. I want you to put me down if I ever lose control of myself again. Issei looked down and kicked a rock with his right foot before I can hurt anyone. Grayfia said nothing at first because she was surprised to hear such proposal from Issei. She turned her head to look at him and saw the regret and sadness in his eyes. His grandfather must have told him everything that happened at that match against Ravel Phenex. Around here, you're the only one who has the power to do that. Issei continued. Last time, I stand no chance against you. Remember? Grayfia said emotionless, crossing her arms over her chest while glancing at Issei. But it's because I took you by surprise, Grayfia-san. Also, what choice do I have? You're my best option now. Issei asked. His expression remained unchanged. My grandfather is nowhere to be found. Shigure-san has her own guardian duty at Atsuta Shrine. And I can't just pray for Amaterasu-sama's help again either. I had Razor and then the whole group of devils to keep me companies. Next time, my aim might be Buchu, Asia, and the others. He said before turning his head to look at Grayfia. That's why I'm asking you to make that decision, Grayfia-san. Sigh, I'm supposed to keep this from you, but since you've already asked me that, I think it'll do no harm reveal it to you, Aiz-san. Grayfia took a deep breath before saying, Cockabeel and the Excaliburs aren't the only reason I'm here. The truth is, the higher-ups want someone to watch over you and prevent you from harming Rias Gremory Aju-sama. Should you ever lose yourself again, even if it means I will have to kill you. Issei said nothing. After what happened at the raiding game match between Aju-sama and Ravel Phenex-sama, some members of the council feels wary of your existence, and all has agreed that you're too dangerous to walk around freely. Killing you will upset the Shinto pantheon since you're the only successor of Hayato Furinji and one of the 3 guardians of Japan's imperial regalia. But it's the choice we have to make in order to keep an important figure like Aju-sama safe. Even in the past, the higher-ups had made some extremely harsh decision for the greater good of the devil faction. So something like that is somewhat completely normal for them. Grayfia said in a small tone. I see, Issei said with a small smile. I'm a relief that you've already prepared to do it, Grayfia-san. He then continued with a question. Did Buchu know? Yes, and she went straight to Sirzechs-sama and exploded into his face. Grayfia nodded her head and Issei chuckled softly at that. She really cared about him, didn't she? She even used her position as the heiress of Gremory to threaten the council. But, Grayfia sighed, she's still too young to understand, and her growing feelings for you will never allow Aju-sama to let something like that to happen. The silver-haired queen then looked at Issei. I'm very surprised, Aiz-san, to hear those words from you. It must be really hard for you. It's better to die as a hero than live to see myself become a monster. Issei made a small smile. Just promise me that, for Rias and everyone's sake, you won't hesitate. I promise, Aiz-san. Grayfia nodded her head before raising her hand. She was a little hesitating at first, but then she placed it on his shoulder and squeezed gently. I also want you to promise me one thing, Aiz-san. What's it? For Aju-sama and everyone's sake, do not lose yourself. Issei widened his eyes at that. That's all I ask. Grayfia-san, Issei said. He then pointed at himself, and then placed a finger on his lip before putting one of his hands on the other's palm. I promise. Line break. After school on the same day, Issei, Kiba and Momo gathered in the park and changed to the priest and sister clothes, which Momo bought on a cosplay costume website, after finishing their daily normal club activity. Issei and Kiba also wore fake crosses on their neck to finish their disguise. If the cross were real, then the two of them would have gotten seriously injured. Even though Issei had warned her that what they were doing was extremely dangerous, Momo decided to tag along, because she wanted to help. She also wanted to witness an actual battle for the first time, saying it was something she had to get used to because she's definitely going to face a lot of times in the near future. Issei didn't argue with her anymore after that. The three of them walked around town. They walked mainly in suspicious places where there weren't any people and were reported to have strange and abnormal activities. Time went by quickly, and then it was already evening. No matter how much he wanted to continue searching for Gabriel and his underlings, he knew that he would get in trouble if he didn't return soon. His action was kept secret from Buchu and the others to begin with, and it would also be troublesome if they got caught by the student council Sonacitri. Rias would also start worrying if he didn't return before 6. Phew. Momo sighed as she put a hand on her head. If I were an evil man with black wings, where would I hide? She wondered her thought out loud. However, before she could get an answer, she bumped into Issei's back when he suddenly stopped his feet. Eh? She asked in curiosity. It's not just him, but Kiba had also stopped and started looking around. Issei-kun, you feel it too, right? Kiba asked seriously. Yeah. Issei nodded his head while he was feeling a cold chill in his body. In an instant, Issei summoned his sword, yanking it out from a magic circle. Head up, Issei cried, and when they looked up, they all saw a white-haired young priest falling down, holding a long sword in his hand. It was shaped like a long kriss, and the blade appeared wide with a diamond-shaped gap through it and spikes on both edges. Peekaboo! The priest cried and tried to slash them, but Issei raised his blade and blocked it. Freed, Issei growled in a low tone, glaring at the strayed exorcist. Eyes-kun? He. The priest smirked. Well, isn't this a weird reunion? Have you gotten stronger? Is it all right to kill you now? He asked with the same attitude like before. Issei said nothing and raised his other hand to get his second sword. But before he could make any move, Kiba jumped in and started attacking with violent strikes. But Eyes-kun is... Momo tried to call for the blonde boy, but her voice fell into deaf ear. Seriously, what's wrong with him? She asked and removed the exorcist cloak, doing the same as Issei. So that's our enemy. Yes, he's a stray exorcist. Freed is a psycho who kills monsters, devils, and even people who make pacts with us for the sake of his own pleasure. Momo was taken aback by that, as she herself was someone who made a pact with devil and became Issei's regular client. Yes, Momo-chan, there's a human like that around, and he's not the first stray exorcists I have ever met. The pink-haired girl gulped nervously. Summon your boosted gear and get for the worse. She did as she was told and summoned boosted gear, making the red dragon gauntlet appear on her arm in a flash of light. Issei then turned his attention back to the battle, where Kiba and Freed were clashing in a battle of both swordsmanship and speed. However, the knight could see that Kiba was handling Freed quite well, even if his opponent was wielding a fragment of the ultimate holy sword Excalibur. Eventually, Kiba found an opening and threw his sword at Freed before creating several more demonic swords to attack him from every direction. Yuha, that is a good circus trick, you rotten devil. Freed knocked away the demonic swords one after another with an expression of excitement. My Excalibur is Excalibur rapidly. In terms of velocity, it won't lose to anything. The holy sword that Freed held started to vibrate at the tip, and then disappeared, moving so fast that it disappeared from view. Freed destroyed all of the demonic swords and then rushed towards Kiba. It's not working. Their swords clashed, and much to his shock, the demonic swords that Kiba had in both hands crumbled. The stray exorcist then went for a killing move, slashing his sword downwards at Kiba. However, before it could get anywhere near its destination, Issei appeared between them and kicked him in his chest, sending him flying back while holding his chest in pain. Like I would let you, Issei growled and leapt forward. Eyes-kun, wait, Kiba called. It couldn't reach him. I'm stronger than you, Freed called, and his sword started to glow again. He started moving with extreme speed and tried to cut Issei when he was close enough, thinking that he could neither block it with demonic swords nor fast enough to dodge it. However, much to his shock, Issei suddenly appeared behind him, with his fist cocking back. He turned his head around and thought about making a round slash, but before he could do that, Issei suddenly disappeared and reappeared in front of him almost instantly, shocking the stray exorcist to the core. Charging forward with full speed, leaving a bluish aura in his path, Issei carved up the strayed exorcist with a spinning slash, sending him into the air with him before striking down, leaving a deep cut on Fried's shoulder before sending him crashing down to the ground. "Grr," Fried growled as he coughed blood. "Whoa," Momo gasped in amazement as she looked at Issei. "Surprise, asshole?" Issei smirked slyly as he wiped his bloody blade. "You call that fast? Even when falling, you're slow." The exorcist gritted his teeth in anger as his taunt. He sheathed his sword back into its scabbard and turned around to look at Kiba. "I will leave the rest to you, Kiba," he said. He wanted to kill the shitty priest himself, but it would be a bad move because he had started feeling his own bloodlust. Fighting someone like Fried, there was no need for sympathy or holding back, so he needed to stop before it could get worse. "All right then, Issei-kun." Kiba nodded his head slowly while walking forward, summoning a demonic sword into his hand. However, before Kiba could approach him, there was a voice. Sword birth, huh? It's a sacred gear that can have an infinite number of powers depending on the possessor." It was another priest who had the appearance of a short, bespectacled elderly man with gray hair and mustache, wearing a priest outfit. "Is it you, old man Balba?" Fried asked while holding his shoulder to stop the bleeding. The Devils and Dragon team became shocked at Fried's word. "Balba Galilei," Kiba glared at the old man with eyes full of hatred. "I certainly am." The old man admitted it normally before looking at Fried. "Fried, what are you doing?" "TCH, can you see that I'm playing with some shitty devil?" Fried asked while grinning like a maniac. "And one of them can bite really hard." HMPH. To think that you, the user of Excalibur rapidly, would lose against a devil in terms of speed. It seems you still can't use the holy sword perfectly yet. Balba said casually like it was nothing. "Now is not the time for playing. We have to return immediately." "TCH, Fried growled before saying to Issei, "I will be escaping now. The next time we meet will be the time of our ultimate battle." Fried said that, but "I won't let you escape." There was someone who suddenly ran past Issei with a very fast speed before clashing swords with Fried, who used his good hand to hold Excalibur rapidly. But eventually he was still knocked back by the brutal force of the strike and its extremely destructive power. It was Xenovia, wielding Excalibur destruction in her hand. Yaho, Eyes-kun. Irina, and of course, Xenovia's partner and Issei's childhood friend. Irina was also there as well. She greeted him cheerily before pointing her hand at Balba, Fried Zelzen. "Balba Galilei, rebels. I will cut you both down in the name of God." "Ha, don't say the name of the hateful God that I hate, you bitch." Fried and Xenovia exchanged words, but fighting Xenovia wasn't an option for him. He then reached his hand into his pocket and pulled out a ball of light, which was his way to escape. "Old man Balba, we are escaping. However, we are going to report this to the boss, Cockabeel. There's no other way." "See ya? The alliance of church and devils." Fried threw down the ball of light on the ground, making it explode on contact in a blinding flash of white light. The light covered the whole area, blinding their eyes, and by the time Issei and everyone had regained their sight, Fried and Balba were long gone. "We are going after them, Irina." "Okay," Xenovia and Irina nodded at each other and sprinted from there. "I'm going after them too. I won't let you escape, Balba Galilei," Kiba cried and went away after them as well, leaving Issei and Momo behind. "Hey Kiba, wait for..." Then at that moment, he felt the presence of someone behind them. "When I thought that the flow of power was irregular, there was a familiar voice behind him. This is certainly troublesome." When he turned around, his eyes widened when he saw Rias, with Grayfia behind her, standing there, with a stern look on her face and her arm crossing underneath her chest. "Eyes. What's the meaning of this? Explain." Line break. "Destroying Excalibur, how reckless of you too." Buchu said that with an unpleasant face and she put her hand on her forehead. After the incident with Fried and Balba, Rias took the two of them to the nearby park, where they were forced to kneel traditionally in front of the fountain. Momo was scratching the back of her head while smiling nervously at Grayfia, who was glaring at her with a cold expression on her face. The Red Dragon Empress truly looked like a student who did something wrong and was about to face the wrath of her teacher. So Yuyudo went after that person called Bulba. Yes, I think he's with Irina and Xenovia. Issei nodded his head. I think that he's going to call us if something happens. Eyes, do you think Yuyudo, who became an Avenger, would call us normally? Rias sighed before asking, why did you do this? Because he's my friend and I want to help him. Isn't that what is friends for? Issei asked, raising his voice a little, helping each other. I know you only want to help him, Eyes, but what you did could have affected the world of devils. Rias shook her head. You understand that, right? Issei said nothing at first, only lowered his head while gritting his teeth. That was exactly the reason why he didn't let Rias or anyone know about his plan. I sent my familiar to search for Yuyudo. Let's go to him with the rest of the club members when he is found. We will decide what to do from there. Okay. Okay, Issei replied curtly. Rias then did something that surprised him. She got down from her seat and wrapped her arm around his head, bringing his head into her chest and hugged him gently. Buchu, you really are a reckless child, she said warmly as she patted him gently, making me worry so much like that. He wanted to help his friend, and yet all he did was make her feel worried. He thought he could handle it on his own, overestimated his own ability to fight without realizing that he didn't have a proper plan for it. Maybe he had taken that matter too lightly. Let's go home, Eyes, Rias said with a small smile. We won't be able to help anyone like this. You're right, Buchu. Issei nodded his head with a small smile. Beside him, Momo, meanwhile, breathed out a sigh of relief and was about to stand up, but was stopped from doing so by a glare from Grayfia. Eh? Excuse me? Momo asked in shock while pointing at herself and Issei, but I thought. It's Aju-sama's choice to whether or not she need or don't need to punish her servant for his action. You, on the other hand, is not her servant. So. But as your teacher, who's not just training you to become stronger, but also responsible, it's my duty to discipline you. Grayfia said to Momo, who gulped nervously. Aiz-san is quite strong in his own right, so he can handle himself. You, on the other hand, are not ready for battle yet. You're reckless, stupid, and full of yourself. Because of them, punishment needs to be served. She then raised her hand, which then glowed with magic power. 1,000 spankings should be enough. Rias and Issei could only look at Momo in sympathy while the pink-haired girl was crying out for his help. Line break. By the time Buchu and Issei arrived home, the sun was setting, showing that it was almost night time. They parted ways with Grayfia along our way home. The silver-haired queen had decided to go to Momo's apartment with her to teach her a couple of lessons about responsibility. She also planned to teach Momo the basic lessons of magic power and how to call for them. We are back. When Buchu and Issei were taking our shoes off and were about to walk the hallway, Mum showed her face from the kitchen. She then waved her hands at us, telling them to come silently while having a strange smile on her face. The two of them looked at each other strangely and went towards the kitchen. Come here, Asia-chan, Raynare-chan. Hahu. The two leapt forward as if they were pushed by his mother. Both of them were wearing aprons, with Raynare's in purple and Asia's in light blue. Issei and Rias both gasped in shock, the former more than the later because the point wasn't the colors of their aprons, but the fact that they were currently wearing only aprons on their body. It barely covered anything and showed a lot of skin, especially in Raynare's case because she had a more mature body than Asia. What is the meaning of this? Issei asked in shock with a red face. It's not like he hadn't seen anything, mind you. He had seen every single detail of their bodies since they slept with him naked every night. But for some reason, the sights of their naked body teasingly being hidden behind aprons were strangely appealing and even more arousing than usual. That, and he didn't like the fact that he was being watched by his mother as well. Ah, Asia said while fidgeting nervously. A friend of mine in our class told me that you have to wear nothing under the apron when you work in a kitchen in Japan. It is embarrassing, but I have to get used to Japanese culture so. Asia said it with a red face. At this rate, she would soon become an erotic airhead girl. something he didn't want for someone as pure as she was. He looked at Raynare. "Don't look at me, Issei-kun." The girl shrugged. He could see that she wasn't that uncomfortable with her state of clothing. I tried to convince her, but she believed Kuryu more than she believes me. "Then why did you?" "Well, I have my reason. But don't tell me that you don't like what you're seeing," Raynare said with a playful wink. He blushed beet red after that and decided to stop it before the situation could get any worse. Please, put on something and..." "Yufufufu." Of course, at that moment and for some reason, his mother jumped in and stopped him from asking them to wear something. "They look cute in those aprons, don't they? I'm definitely supporting these things. I remember when I was young." Hey, I don't want to hear her story," Issei cried while making a no and absolutely not with his hand, making his mother giggle. "I see." Standing behind him, Rias nodded her head with a regretful voice. So there was a strategy like that. No wonder why he didn't make any more moves even after that. She muttered under her breath before smirking at Asia. "You can become a real devil. You really are a lecherous girl." I don't want to become a lecherous devil." Buchu smirked and Asia replied with a troubled face and teary eyes. "Raynare, you're more and more like a real devil. I like it." Rias gave the fallen a thumb up, which made her bow her head in an old-fashioned way while holding the sleeve of her apron. "Wait a bit. I will also do the same, Asia, Raynare." She then declared and turned around and left the scene quickly. "Wait, Rias-san, I will also help," Midori called and went after Rias. A moment later, she returned with an even more erotic version of Raynare's apron that was crimson red in color. The apron covered only the most important parts while leaving the rest to his eyes. As the girls went into the kitchen to prepare dinner, Issei wisely retreated into his bedroom to take a cold shower. That night, the four of them also slept together, but they were waked up when they felt an enormous pressure they had never felt before. Rias immediately jumped off the bed and stood in front of the window, while Issei was standing protectively beside her. This feeling, Raynare also got up after feeling something. "You again?" Issei growled when he saw Freed, somehow fully healed, and had his sickening smirk on again. This feeling, it can only mean one thing." The crimson-haired heiress said it with a voice filled with hatred and clicked her fingers. She instantly got into her uniform and opened the room's door. "Yahoo, Eyes-kun, Raynare-tan and Asia-tan." Freed greeted them cheerfully. "Looks like you guys are in a bad mood. Were you doing all right? Ara, were you guys having sex? Is it a foursome? Then I'm sorry. Not reading the atmosphere is my charming point." "What do you want, freak?" Raynare asked him, but he just shook his shoulder with a laugh. Rias seemed like she noticed something and looked up. The eyes followed after hers and all widened at what they saw. It was a fallen angel taking an appearance of a young man with black hair and pointy ears. On his back, he possessed 5 pairs of black wings. He also wore a black robe with detailed accessories. He smirked after seeing Buchu. "This is our first time meeting, daughter of the House of Gremory. The crimson hair is beautiful. It reminds me of your brother that I hate enough to make me want to vomit." When Issei looked closely, he could see that he was carrying a motionless person. "Nice to meet you, one of the leaders of the fallen angels, Gabriel. And my name is Rias Gremory. I will also add one more thing. We and the House of Gremory are beings that are closest to the Mau, and also the furthest from it. If you are here to discuss politics with me, then it's no use. This is a gift." He then threw the person he was carrying at Issei, who reacted immediately and caught them in his arm. His eyes widened in shock when he saw it was Irina. She was covered in blood as there were cuts all over her body. She was also breathing heavily. "Asia," Issei called out for the former numb and put Irina on the ground. The blonde immediately came over and started healing her. There was a green light coming out of Asia's body, which covered Irina and made her expression start to soften, and she started to breathe gently. "She came into my base, so I gave her a welcome. Well, I couldn't catch the other two." Gabriel said it with a laugh. From his story, it seemed Kiba and Xenovia escaped. Also, Rias Gremory, I wouldn't do something as stupid as talking with a Mau, or someone as strong as he is. "Grayfia?" Rias asked coldly. "What did you do to her and Momo?" Issei turned his head to look at Gabriel in pure hatred. Don't worry, sister of Mau, she is being held inside a barrier that I set up myself. It will probably take her some time to notice it, though, and by the time she manages to break out of that barrier on her own. A smirk appeared on his face as he looked at Rias, who couldn't believe she was taken out of the scene just like that. Now, if I rape and kill his little sister, then Sirzechs' anger will be pointed towards me. That won't be bad at all. Rias then glared at Cockabeel with disdainful eyes. So what is your motive for contacting me? Cockabeel answered Rias' question with joy. I will be rampaging in this town using your base, Kyu Academy, as the starting point. Then Sirzechs will also appear, right? If you do something like that, the war between God, fallen angels and devils will begin again, you know? That's what I'm wishing for. I thought that Michael would start a war if I steal the Excalibur. But what he sent were grunt exorcists and 2 holy sword wielders. It's boring. I'm really bored indeed. That's why I'm going to rampage at Sirzechs' sister's base. See? It looks fun, right? Rias made a sound of disgust with her tongue, a proof that she was really pissed. You war freak, but you said it with hatred. But Cockabeel laughed with joy. Even for a fallen angel, to think that you have fallen this far down, Raynare muttered as she glared the man she once called her leader. You like war that much? Yeah, that's it. I was bored after the war between the 3 sides. Azazel and Shemheza aren't that keen on the next war. They started to collect something boring like sacred gear and started to do some weird researches. Something useless like that won't be of any use to us. Well, it's a different story if it's a boosted gear like the one that girl has, but it's not something you can find so easily. Are you guys also after her sacred gear? Issei asked loudly with a firm tone. At least I'm not interested in it. But Azazel might be. His collection hobby is crazy. Cockabeel said, either way, I'm going to be starting a battle involving the holy swords, Rias Gremory. For starting a war. A school where both little sisters of Sirzechs and Leviathans go to. It must be filled with demonic powers so that I can enjoy the chaos. It's also the best place to release the real power of Excaliburs. It's a good place for the battlefield. Hiya ha ha ha, isn't my boss the best? His craziness is the best. So I'm also eager to do it. He even gives me treats like this. Fried took out an Excalibur. He also had one of them in each hand and 2 of them on his hips. The one on the right is Excalibur Rapidly. The one on the left is Excalibur Nightmare. The one on my hip is Excalibur Transparent. I also received Excalibur Mimic from the girl over there. I also feel like getting Excalibur Destruction that the other girl has. Hiya, am I the first person in the world to be in possession of this many Excaliburs? I also received an element from the Geezer Balba that allows me to wield holy swords. Right now I'm in a hyper mode that allows me to wield all of them, you know? I'm invincible. I'm wonderful. I'm the strongest. Hiya ha 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 ha. Fried laughed as if he found it really funny. Balba's Holy Sword Research. It's the real deal if it shows this much result. To tell the truth, it seemed suspicious when he joined my plan. What are you planning to do with the Excaliburs? Rias asked him. Cockabeel moved his 10 black wings and moved his body in the direction of the school. Ha ha ha, let's have a war. The little sister of Sirzechs Lucifer, Rias Gremory. After that, he flew away. Flash, and once again, Fried was gone in a blinding flash of light, using the same item like before. Without further ado, Rias declared, Eyes, everyone, we are going to the school. Yes, a big battle against the leader of the fallen angels was about to start.